so I won't read the wrong lines. Okay, welcome everyone to the special meeting Tuesday, July 25th. It is probably about 10:02. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Tim, you want to lead us in the pledge?
I'd be happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, on to regular agenda items. Number 2A, information, discussion, action to adopt an order to cancel the November 7th, 23 Tunnel Basin Unified School District Number 33 election and appoint the individuals as shown on Schedule A of the order for the term of office ending on December 31st, 24. Good morning, Roy.
Good morning. How are you? A little explanation behind this. The Tonto board, 5 elected officials on the Tonto board. 2 of them resigned in early May. I went through a process to appoint those 2. I appointed them in June. It took about a month to go through all the candidates, that type of thing. Once I appointed them, 2 more board members from Tonto resigned. So that left basically 3, and they have a quorum. For me, though the statutes give me authority to appoint board members, I don't think that it is ethical for me to make the decision to end up appointing all 5 board members, all 5 elected officials to a school board. And so consequently, and that's what would have happened because of that. So I called a special election because in my mind, it's the people that need to elect those folks. So we got the election ready, and lo and behold, only 2 applicants filed for those. So they would have to pay for that election to the tune of about $7,000. And so I am canceling the election, and I will appoint those board members appointed as elected, which I'm okay with because appointed as elected is very different than me just appointing. They are appointed as elected. In other words, they will do their entire term. And it's the people from Tonto Basin that applied for the election and went through the paperwork and got the signatures. It's not me finding somebody and appointing them. So I'm okay with that because it's the people that have spoken in that case. So consequently, I can go ahead and undo this election, if you will, which is fine. Can I answer questions for you?
Thank you, Roy. Supervisor Humphrey?
I guess the question that comes to mind is why the turnover? It seems like, wow. That's the question that just comes off the top.
Sure.
Why all of a sudden the major turnover? But I guess that's not something that I really need an answer to because it's not anything I can deal with anyway.
Good question, Mr. Humphreys, and a good answer too. With small districts, with any districts, certainly the statutes give a great deal of authority and autonomy to the local school district, the local governing board, who are elected by their people. Just like the statutes give authority to me and to you, those are in separate silos. So what happens sometimes, and it seems to be with small districts, controversies arise and the whole community gets involved in these controversies, and it causes occurrences like this to happen. Do I wish I could step in the middle of it and say, let me help you? I do, but I have to be mindful of where the statutes, where my authority ends, right, where it begins, and what I'm actually authorized to do. So I do step in and say, in terms of the interim superintendent, and how can I help you? How can I help with your finances? Are there questions I can answer? Are there experiences are there questions you have with operations that you don't have an expertise on? Can I lend a hand? But I can't go in and.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, I'm trying to be
And I support
discreet
what you're
here.
doing. I just hope what we do helps.
What's that?
I said, I understand I support what you're doing, and I understand. I just hope that what we do helps.
What you do does help, and none of us like to see a school board go through this, because, I mean, my experience is, once a board starts, I call it kind of the tippy canoe. When it starts taking on water, and it just takes on more and more, and then it takes 7 or 8 years to really get things squared away. So the best we can do is give help as much as possible until such time that happens.
Thanks, Mr.
That's the
Chair.
best I can do.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Roy. I understand your rationalization. I just would refer to our legal opinion about whether or not you can actually appoint as elected versus just appoint, and how that works.
Okay, the applicable statute here, it's ARS 16410. Basically, it's giving the board the power to eliminate the elections and appoint upon petitions being submitted, not a petition, an application for candidacy. So the board would have the ability to eliminate the elections and appoint in that regard, not the superintendent.
Okay. Thank you.
You good?
Yeah.
Roy, I'm good. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we cancel the November 7th, 2023 Tonto Basin Unified School District number 33 election and appoint the individual as shown on Schedule A of the order for the term of office ending December 31st, 2024.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
Having a motion and second, all in favor do so by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rory.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps. On to 2B, information, discussion, action to authorize advertisement of invitation for bids number 120422, Stagecoach Trail Improvements. Homer? Oh, we got you this morning. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. This is a request to advertise invitation for bids number 120422, Stagecoach Trail Improvements Project. The proposed work is in the Roosevelt Lake Resort community on Stagecoach Trail from Spur Trail to Antelope Trail. The improvements consist of constructing new pavement and a concrete valley gutter for the 2-lane roadway with side street curb returns. The project funding uses the Transportation Excise Tax Fund and is currently funded at $500,000. Dibble Engineering has prepared plans, specifications, and a project estimate for advertisement. This community lies at the foothills of a nearby mesa and is located on the east bank of Pinto Creek. During storm events, the community experiences inundation ranging in severity from nuisance ponding to street and parcel inundation. The primary objective of the project is to improve drainage and mitigate existing flooding potential and to reduce stormwater-related maintenance for both residents and county staff. The project is designed to collect and convey water from a 10-year, 6-hour storm event. In conclusion, it is in the best interest of Gila County to solicit bids for the Roosevelt Lake Resort Stagecoach Trail Improvements Project. Again, the project is funded in the FY24 Transportation Excise Tax Fund for $500,000. And this project will improve drainage and reduce the potential for flooding due to storm events. As a recommendation, it's a recommendation of our Public Works Department Director that the Board of Supervisors advertise this construction project to solicit bids for drainage improvements in the Roosevelt Lake Resort community. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Humphrey, questions, comments?
I don't have any questions. This is one I've been riding like 6 years. It's a drainage that I feel is extremely necessary, because we've had work sessions on this before, and we've displayed pictures and things that show completely, neighborhoods that are underwater if we get storms. And so for this drainage to be coming up is important to the residents there, and so I'm glad to see it come before us. And I have no questions because I've stayed with this project and get well informed as we've gone forward with this.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Tom. If I remember right, wasn't there a component here about the water company and water lines that went underneath and who's gonna pay for what?
Yes, sir.
And so that's all been worked out?
It's still in the works. As it stands right now in the plans and specifications, we're going to encase any water mains that are in the way. We're going to encase them in a cement slurry mix.
Okay.
However, the water company was recently sold.
Oh.
The new owners have come to us and expressed an interest in working with our contractor during our project. They would like for us to dig trenches at each intersection, and also along Stagecoach Trail, there's another section. Our contractor would take a slight pause. They would come in, install the water mains, pressure test them, chlorinate them, flush them out, and get them operational. Our role would be to dig the trenches, fine grade the trenches, place the bedding material, backfill. This is still in the works. Nothing's been finalized. It's not in the current plans that we're advertising, so this would be an addendum to the project. Our benefit would be that we would not have to use the cement slurry mix to encase the water mains that are in the way. The contractor would the water company would cut and plug those water mains, and we would just remove them. But again, this is all in the works right now.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
So Tom, with that, if there's a change like that, do you see any big difference in the cost of the project, or?
There could be some, but I've kind of, so they won't have to do the cement slurry.
Mm-hmm.
They won't have to take the time to gently expose these water mains, which are, my understanding, they're pretty old and they could break, so they've got to be pretty gentle with them. So that will speed the contractor up in some aspects. In other aspects, digging the trenches and then waiting for the water company to install the water mains, that's going to slow us down. So hopefully it'll be a wash, is what I'm thinking.
Okay. All right, thank you. With that, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to authorize the advertisement of invitation for bid number 120422, Stagecoach Trail Improvement.
I will second that.
Having a motion and second, all in favor, do so by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
On to C, 2C, information, discussion, action to approve a special event liquor license. Application submitted by Love Where You Live for a special event to be held on August 2nd, 23 at the Copper Valley Recreation Center. Fernando Chipley, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chairman, supervisors, and staff. Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice. Apparently, I tried to annex the country club into the city of Globe, and no, I thought it was in the city of Globe. I got permission for the special event and got approved, got it issued, and then it turned out the fire chief informed me that it is actually in the county. So Michael Driscoll was kind enough to help me figure out what we could do. So I called the Department of Liquor. They canceled that special event and are waiting for me to show up, hopefully with an approved special event through the county authorizing this special event. It is for the Rural Policy Forum that's going to be here in the Globe area for next week. And so it'll be a special dinner presentations, and we'll be running the bar for the Lions Club. And Love Where You Live is Thea Wilshire. She has a nonprofit that they're doing all the beautification around the area. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Fernando. Supervisor Humphrey, any questions, comments?
I have no questions, other than I'm glad we're able to get you in front of us with a week to go before the event, so.
Well, thank you for
So,
helping me.
yeah,
Appreciate
you
it.
bet, not a problem.
Supervisor,
No
good.
questions, thanks.
I'm good too, Fernando, so good luck with your project.
Okay, thank you very
That
much.
I'd entertain, I got a question coming.
Yes, I just need to modify the suggested motion. It's not to approve the special liquor license application, it's to submit, a recommendation to the liquor board that you guys would approve it.
Okay. You got that, Supervisor Christensen?
Getting there. Recommend, what?
Recommendation to the board?
Chairman, member supervisors, submitting a recommendation for approval to the liquor board.
Okay. I think I got all that down. Are you calling for a motion?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will move to submit a recommendation for approval of the special event liquor license submitted by the Love Where You Live for a special event which will occur August 2nd, 2023 at the Cobra Valley Recreational Center.
I got a nod, so I'll second it.
You got a nod. Have a motion and second. All in favor, do so by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion
Thank
carries.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Fernando.
much.
Good seeing you. Have a good day. On to number 3, work session items. 3A, information discussion regarding the County Supervisors Association's CSA 24 legislative proposals that will be considered at the October 11th through the 13th CSA Legislative Summit. James?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of SoCal remain seated here for this presentation. I want to thank Andy Jacobs for coming to join us here for this discussion from the Policy Development Group in the state of Arizona and representing Gila County at the state legislature. I wanted to, and I put this on, copy this on your, on the counter there, of just kind of a summary of what we did with last year's legislative, CSA Legislative Summit. And this one will be in October in Flagstaff, that we'll have that discussion of what we as counties in Arizona are going to take to the Arizona State Legislature, the second session that they will have in January. These are, first of all, the ones that we have just as CSA coalition priorities. One, supporting the state-county partnership, increased transportation investment, and these are things that Craig, when he came and reported to us, that he went through, but these wanted to, again, show that these were the legislative priorities that were established as a part of the summit. The thing that was a positive result was there was a $12.5 million deposit state match advantage for rural transportation program, meaning that when there are matching requirements for certain grants, that there's certain monies set aside at the state level. I also wanted to note that there was 500-something million that was set aside because there was a cash balance that if you travel north out of Globe, you'll notice that down in the canyon that the road was just one complete big huge pothole. They have, the ADOT has paved on the southern portion of the road into Saw River Canyon, has completely repaved, put on a new surface of asphalt. And so that was one thing that the state legislature did approve, that 500+ million for specialized projects to get some new asphalt down. And there were other ones in Gila County, but that was one very specific that has made a big difference. Expand access to broadband, that there's new rural broadband accelerated match, 23.6 million that is eligible for counties. There's also about $100 billion, I believe, that is set aside for broadband throughout Arizona, and the Arizona Commerce Authority is having specific meetings of how to determine whether what is really underserved and not served areas of Arizona. And so we're having those discussions, and we'll have input to the state, to the ACA, to what is underserved, and that. So that's something that will be heavily discussed as part of the summit this year. Protect investments in public safety pensions. As you know, we as a county went through and really addressed the issues of public safety pensions for Gila County. The danger is that the state legislature will look at it and say, oh, well, Gila County, we did a bond and sold those and got caught up as far as PSPRS is concerned. Concern is they'll look at that and say, we're fully funded, or we're over 100% funded now. But so we can grant a whole bunch of new incentives to attract firefighters and policemen and deputies and that. And so it's a continuous education process with the state legislatures. No, we still have that debt on our books. We're managing it. We're doing it very wisely as a county. But we can't get out of line of what is a healthy retirement system. And so the state legislature, County Supervisors Association, commits significant resources to that education and making sure that we don't get in a bad way again with our retirement plans. As far as the unions that are trying to tout for better benefits for public safety people, I think that they are, this is just a personal opinion, but I believe that they are off base saying that we need to have all these new benefits, because in my opinion of what's attracting individuals to come and work in jobs for the county, across the counties and across in government, regardless of what they are, including public safety, is the bottom line salaries, the wages. And the more money you put into a benefit that a new recruit doesn't see for 30, 40, 50 years, they could really care less about that. They want to get that money in their pocket now. And so enhancing benefits takes away from our ability to put money in the pockets of our detention officers, our detectives, and others in the sheriff's office. So very important, in my opinion, that that CSA and all of us address that. Addresses challenges in probation funding. As you know, the state legislature has wanted to pass on more costs for probationers to counties. And if we give a raise, then the state legislature wants to say, well, that's on the counties, and the counties has to, because in probation, there's about half of the probation officers are funded by the state of Arizona, and about half of them are funded by the county. But we can't say, okay, well, we're going to give a raise to just the probation officers that are paid for through the county general fund. And so we give it across the board. And that's why a year ago when we talked about raises, there was a pretty good discussion about that here with you as a board. But the state legislature, they wanted to, they had it in their bills up to the very end of saying, yeah, the counties, you've got to absorb whatever there is. But CSA was able to get that pulled out, and then also appropriated $6.75 million to cover those salary increases. So we're good for the coming year in probation funding, and they can get all the raises that you have approved for all county employees. Juvenile corrections, there was a time shortly after the Great Recession that all counties had to kick in to pay for a state department, the Department of Juvenile Corrections. Over time, the counties got away from that, except there has been for the last several years, Maricopa and Pima counties had to continue to pay for a state department. This last year, Pima County was taken away from that, eliminated from that payment of a state department of $1.7 million savings for Pima County. Maricopa County is still paying $6.7 million to that state managed department. And then the flexibility language. Flexibility language I have, through the County Managers Association, have argued repeatedly, and I've probably irritated a few counties that utilize this flexibility language. And what that is that it allows for, if you have a special district in your county, like we have several special districts in the county, but one that we utilize is the library district. And if we use this flexibility language, we could take up to $1.25 million from taxes that are intended for the library district and put that into the general fund. So there's 2 counties that utilize this now. Navajo County did for a number of years. I believe that they have discontinued the use of it, but La Paz County, and there are certain reasons there, and also Apache County, that those 2 utilize, they have a juvenile corrections jail district in Apache County that they're taking that money and putting it into their general fund to help subsidize general county expenditures. So that's what this flexibility language allows, is taking tax dollars that are intended for a special district that was approved by the voters, taking it out of that intended purpose that was approved by the voters and put it into the general fund. And I've argued that those things need to be cleaned up because this was originally instituted during the Great Recession, allowed flexibility that when the state was not only reducing county revenues but also passing expenses on to the county, it was pretty essential in a lot of ways. But we've been long since past the Great Recession, and they're still utilizing this. And so my philosophy, or my challenge to counties that use it, is what happens when the economy turns sour again? What happens when we go south? And you've got to have that, and you're already utilizing it and taking all that out. Then there's no ability to manage through a downturn in the economy. So those are the counties, overall what the County Supervisors Association has addressed with the state legislature. The ones that we brought to the legislative summit, there were 15 proposals that were made and they are listed here 1 through 15. Of those 15 that we had discussion, spent a good 5-6 hours discussing these items with all the other counties. And in the end, of those 15, there were only, I believe, 4 or 5 that actually got approved for the County Supervisors Association to carry forward. You're right. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of them. So half of them, less than half, got taken to as part of the platform of the County Supervisors Association. Of those 7 that actually made it to CSA and taken to the state legislature, there were 4 that actually were put into bills, and they are indicated in green. The one that was mental health evaluation modifications. And what this was is that they required, in rural counties, required 2 doctors to do a mental health evaluation. And that's just really hard because we don't have the available resources. So they've changed it so you have to have 1 doctor and 1 nurse practitioner or something like that. So have able to address that. School district legal representation, that was where the county attorney's office was having to represent school districts and the community college districts required to. There's new flexible language that the county attorney's office can say, yeah, we're able to do that, or no, we're not. That they're not mandated that they have to, that they can take a consideration their workload, and also sometimes there's a conflict of interest and they're required to represent the county Board of Supervisors, but so they don't have to represent both sides where there's conflict of interest. Taxpayer protection, and that's just reducing the amount of things that have to be advertised, which sometimes gets extensive. And finally, biosolid restrictions for Yuma County. And they have a big deal on the west coast of Arizona of taking garbage out of California and putting it onto Arizona property, and so there's some issues with that. So as we, it takes a lot to actually have a discussion about what we want to do as our legislative platform. Wanted to have the discussion with you here today of any issues that you might have thought about or considered, and we've got Andy, as I mentioned, here with us today, that we can put this together as a package to bring it to the legislative summit. Any issues that we want to bring to the CSA are required by a week from Friday on week from Monday, this coming Monday, August 7th. And so we need to have this discussion that if there's anything we want to have. Want to present a couple. I know there's one for Supervisor Humphrey, and I'm going to let you, Supervisor Humphrey, present that and discuss that as you want about the payment of taxes by cash and that, if you wouldn't mind. But one is the DIFM money that we received based on the fires, wildland fires that we've had here in Gila County. That for 2 years in a row, the state legislature saw how devastated Gila County and Coconino counties were by wildfires and appropriated significant amounts of money. And of that money, we have been able to utilize to get equipment that we need and to get sandbags and other things that help us to mitigate the circumstances of flooding that we received. As you know, in this year's budget, that money was not appropriated to DIFM. And so through Coconino County, and I've talked to Coconino County Manager Steve Peru about putting forward a proposal that there be $35 million included in the state budget annually. And this $35 million would be intended specifically for counties, because as you know, the money that was originally allocated, 140-something million, that was originally allocated went partly to counties and partly to the state and all different things. This is a request to have $35 million appropriated to the Department of Forestry and Fire Management annually, so that there can be money available not just for repairing damage done by floods, but in thinning and other projects that will help to deal with forest fires and help to reduce the magnitude of forest fires as they come on. So I have indicated that we would definitely be, as a county, as far as I was concerned, interested in supporting this, maybe even co-sponsoring this with Coconino County, and would put this forward for any discussion that there might be of requesting through County Supervisors Association the $35 million for to be channeled through DIFM for use by counties in fighting forest fires and mitigating damage that comes from that, from flooding, post-fire, and also helping to deal with forests and reduce the magnitude of forest fires. Mr. Chairman.
James, I was able to have a little bit of discussion with them in Texas about this as well, and I think it's a good plan. I think there needs to be some kind of parameters set by just how much would you be willing to put into project based on fires, and hold how much in reserves for emergency circumstances, because we never know when that big rain's going to hit us and roads are going to flood and things like that. So I mean, I don't know how you would do that, I guess is what I'm saying. But I think the proposal and the whole idea of this is good. You know, it's, with any luck, we wouldn't spend any of it on the emergency side of it, you know, and be able to spend some on projects. But so with that, I don't know if you guys thought about how that would be handled, or percentage wise, what of that 35 million you could look at for project based solutions or whatever.
Mr. Chairman, haven't had that discussion at this point in time, but certainly that is under consideration. And as you know, the governor, there was some money left in the account that had originally been appropriated, and the governor stopped any projects ahead of time so that there would be money available for any emergencies, just like you're talking about, that during the monsoon season, if there were any emergencies, that there, to ensure that there's money left aside. So that would definitely be something that would need to be addressed. But as far as I know, that's not been discussed.
Okay. All right, that'd be my main question. Otherwise, I think the thought behind it is good. I do, and I think right now we might have like around $6 million committed in projects that's still getting wrapped up and finished. But so that's my thoughts. How about you guys?
Yeah, I'm all for money for prevention and things, but we also need some for rebuilding infrastructure that we lost during some of these floods. We have, in my district, we've got the hospital that's not protected. We got, Russell Road's washed out, and that power station is right there by the landfill. It's still unprotected. In Roosevelt, we got, a wash that floods out, and we've got water in homes. So, after these fires, I think money for prevention and money to help keep some of these floods from being as damaging. But once they've damaged, I think, well, it's apparent that we need infrastructure money because we haven't had those fires, and since those fires, we haven't been able to rebuild anything. We've got a lot of engineering done, and we've spent some money on what we can do, but we don't have any money to do anything other than sit and watch some of these things fall apart the next rain we get. So, yeah, on that particular deal, I would like to see some infrastructure for after these damaging effects.
Steve, you got anything you want?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, James, for that. Yeah, I look forward to the October time we're going to have in Flagstaff. I wanted to clarify, though, on this flexibility language, the CSA is recommending that we keep that, and you are as well. I kind of got a little lost in there. Sorry.
I believe that the two counties that continue to use that are going to request that it be a part of the CSA platform.
Okay.
I do not support it.
You don't support it. And I'm glad to hear that. I understand. So, yeah, I think it gets to a dangerous point where we can sort of take monies out of pockets that the voters have voted, that's for that project, not for some other project. So, yeah, okay. Thank you for that clarification. That's all I have.
So, James, back to that $35 million. Why was it $35 million? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's an approximate amount of what was from those original appropriations to appropriations. That was what was committed to counties. We have, to date, there's been spent almost 65 million. So about 70 million that was appropriated from 35 million each year that was appropriated to counties, and about 64.6 million. So there's, like it was said, about 6 million that's remaining that can be spent that the governor put on hold. So I believe that was the amount that was appropriated for county use, the 35 million, approximately. I did want to say that we have, as a county, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, $13.6 million of money that through that money, $13.6 million that has come to Gila County and used in Gila County for all the different things that we have. The big user, of course, is Coconino County at $42 million that they've used.
And a lot of that was their water line coming off the peaks.
Yeah.
That's where the big expenditure for Coconino was. As far as project-wise, I think because of the wide areas that we had way more projects. But it was money we're thankful we had. We're thankful we had it to spend where we did, so. But I'm just curious on how that's going to be determined, how much goes where and stuff like that. That's my biggest curiosity, I guess.
I need to research that more fully and look into that if there will be parameters, limitations on what it can be used for, what should be used for, and have that specification in the legislature should they appropriate the money. And Supervisor Humphrey, as you said, there's still a great need in Gila County, absolutely.
And I'm glad Tim brought it up, but Russell Road, and maybe this is a time because this is fire related and part of, maybe could be that money, but where are we with Russell Road? What's really the?
Mr. Chairman, if that's okay, we'll have Homer. We've had several discussions on that, and Homer's looking into that and continuing to pursue what we do with Russell Road. So
could you, Homer?
Chairman,
Yeah.
Chairman and board
apologies, but
members and
that
county
discussion
manager.
is-
Hold it.
that discussion is not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda.
Even though it's part of the fire and the washouts and our projects and everything we tried to get approved,
It's a trust, yeah, Chairman, it's a stretch.
you're saved by the bell, Homer.
Mr. Chairman, let me just say that it is continuing to be pursued actively, and Homer and his team are looking at, it's an expensive project, probably $25 million. The cost of building Tunnel Creek Bridge to repair Russell Road, and so that's a challenge all in itself. She can whack me.
That's what I was
So-
waiting for it.
So to save you a bruise, James, maybe we'll move on.
Yes, thank you, that'd be great.
Mr. Chair, back to just one question, and then we'll move on. But back to that flexibility language on counties using funds. You know, I wonder where that fits in with the state auditors, because it would seem that that would be more of an issue of support or not support. If the auditors are fine with it, I'm not going to go against how a county's surviving or what they're doing with their funds. But I would like some input before I supported or didn't support something on how the state auditors felt about how they were dealing with their funding. That's just my 2 cents worth, and I don't need an answer. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Mr.
And
Chairman?
at some point in time, we can move on to what we'd like to have out for the next legislative summit. But yeah, that's
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, good question. Really, the state auditors has no say in it. If the state legislature passes a law that says you can use flood control district money to pay for detention officer salaries in the general fund, then the state legislature said it's okay. And so the state auditor can't say it's an appropriate use of funds or not, because it's been approved by law.
okay.
Second one, Ms. Chairman, with your permission, wanted to talk about is the lands out here, out by the fairgrounds. And we had had a discussion in a work session, and actually had taken an item to the Board of Supervisors to approve pursuing purchase of state lands out by the fairgrounds, a parcel 120 acres to the west of the fairgrounds and 160 acres to the south of the fairgrounds, total of 280 acres. The state land department came back to the county and said, we're not sure if we want to allow the county to continue to pursue acquisition of that land, because we feel like that in 10 years' time that it's going to be worth more. And so we're just going to let it set for 10 years, and then maybe the state land department can sell it for more money than they could currently. And in speaking with Representative Cook, he said that there's could potentially be some legislative things, and I won't say what else he mentioned about it, but that so I wanted to take a look at and potentially put in a proposal that would differentiate in state statute the difference between what a developer goes to the state land department about acquiring, purchasing state lands that they're going to develop, turn into homes or businesses, whatever it might be. That's a for-profit business enterprise of utilizing those state lands. And of course, that is at a premium cost to the revenues or sales price going back to the state land department. Now, these state land departments, they're supposed to be used for education and different things. And so they do want to make sure they get the maximum dollars and reinvest those dollars back into the state of Arizona through education and other things. But there's an equally important purpose of giving back to the community that we have, why we have a fairgrounds or a park, a recreation activity, or things that we have, that the county's purpose is not necessarily to make a profit on acquiring 280 acres 4 miles north of Globe, that our intent is to benefit the citizens, benefit the public through different things of being able to recreate in Gila County, being able to have open spaces or parks and trails and different things of that nature. went with Supervisor Humphrey last week, toured the fairgrounds and to look and see where we're at with that property and things that we could potentially do. And there is a lot. There's a list of things that bring benefit to the public. So I want to have into your consideration and prepare by the 7th to have unless you say no, we need to just follow whatever the laws are, to see if there's something we can do that would differentiate between a government trying to acquire state land and a developer trying to acquire state land. That there's two separate purposes, and there's a different value. Part of the problem with the county and go through this whole process, we have to invest money to go through this process to acquire state land. But then at the end of the day, after we've invested what maybe several $1,000s, $10,000, whatever it might be, that the property goes up for auction and it goes to the highest bidder. So here we are, a government that's investing to look to not gain from it, to give a quality of life investment for the citizens of Gila County. And somebody can come in that wants to develop it and will make a turn a profit. And if they bid $1 more than Gila County can, that property would go to the developer after Gila County is done, because you have to do research on, is it all the different things, not as much as an environmental statement, but we have to go through a lot of that same process to look at the property and see what impacts it would have by the state selling that property. So I want to see if we need to clarify some of that in state statute. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, James. So, I see what you're saying. I'm not sure how that will work. And in theory, it's already there. It's already the same, just because of the fact that it goes to an auction after it gets in the process. So with that being the case, if we were bidding against 2 or 3 other developers or whatever, it's just however much money we would want to bid on the property. They still have the opportunity to make as much money as that property's going to make.
Should there be a differentiation in state statute between a government and a developer, a for-profit enterprise?
Part of me says yes, and part of me says no. Because I look at it too, you're absolutely right. For us to acquire it, we can use it for different reasons that benefits the public. But also there's a housing need in a lot of our areas that a developer would, contribute to that, probably at a higher price. Let's say if we did affordable housing, a developer may do high-end housing, whatever. The other thing of it is if a developer buys it, the city of Globe has it annexed, it's in Globe, and then they make more off of it, see, than what they're going to make off of us, what we would provide. So there's different ways of looking at this. So for us to have a preference over a developer or whatever, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that could be something to take to the legislature to see if they differentiate between a government reaching for a piece of property or a private developer reaching for a piece of property. And the reason I say that is because, as Mr. Minloff says, if we pursue this, then we have to do all the studies. We have to pay for all the studies before this section will even be set aside for bid.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it's set aside for bid, we can bid on it, but there's no differentiation between us and anyone else. So I would think that if someone went through a government entity, that would be up to the state of whether they felt that because we reached to try to for that property because it's adjoining some property that we recreate in, that there should be some kind of safety net that we are not spending all of our taxpayers' money to clear a portion of property to create more recreation that goes up for bid to the world. So I would think that would be for the state legislation to say, okay, if they want to add a little bit more to the recreational area, then that should be separate from just a private developer going through all the process to put it up, and then it goes for bid. So I would say, if it's something we could take to them, but you never know how the state legislature is gonna go. But I would like to see some kind of safety net if we're gonna reach out and spend money for all the testing and jump through all the hoops to take that portion of property out, that there should be some kind of safety net in going forward with the property. So that's just where I'm at, but that would be up to state legislators to say, no, that sounds good, or it doesn't. But like any of these that we take to them, but they can say, sure, we'll work on it, or no, it doesn't reach the bar. So, and if it doesn't reach the bar, then it's up to us on whether we want to step in and spend the money needed to make this property available to whoever. So it wouldn't hurt to put it before them, but I'm not sure how they would vote on it.
So in this process though, James, I misunderstood, but I thought even though we put the money up to get the project rolling and started, somewhere later on when that project sold or whatever it is, we get the money back if we didn't get it. Is that the case, or am I just dreaming?
Mr. Chairman, we have a $2,000 application fee that we've paid to the State Land Department to start the application. The rest of the fees, I'm not certain that we get refunded for those.
Yeah. That's something, and I agree with Tim on, any other money that we do put in there to start a project like that, no matter what, whether we win it or we don't, if we're the contributing agency in this, then that had to pay this in order for them to sell it, we should have a chance to recoup that money at the end if we don't get it, or it'd be taken off the total of the project and we pay the balance or whatever it is.
Mr. Chairman, one of the original things that I proposed, and also for our property up on 260 in Payson across from the University Way, that one of the things that, again, bandwidth to get these done, but we're looking at for workforce housing, and that's what was a proposal was given to the State Land Department of a potential use for this is workforce housing. You get a private developer, and they're going to get best use, best financial return. Both areas of Gila County have great need for workforce housing, housing in general, and would like to look as a county as we go forward in that vein and to try to help our workforce out as much as we can.
So I think I'm in line by talking about this, Jessica, but you'll tell me if I'm not, I'm sure. So, not very long ago, I had discussion. Actually, it was when we were at Pioneer Pass, visiting with the kids up there on project. A gentleman works for the Forest Service. His name's Devin Quintana. He's up higher in the supervisor's office. And him and the district ranger from the Globe District here were both there that day. And so we were talking about different things and projects and kids and what was going on. But it came up that the Forest Service is wanting out of this station down here. They want to do away with this station, and they want to relocate. So one of the things I asked them was, because they brought it up, was that they were interested in moving out towards the fairgrounds right there. And so one of the questions I asked them was, would you guys be willing to sit around the table and talk about that? Because we also have an interest in some property around the fairgrounds, and maybe there's a way we can go in with a joint venture that would satisfy them. You know, they're needing about 10, 20 acres or whatever it is to relocate. And I said, and I know that the county is kicking around different ideas on some property out there. So that may be something that will work out and build a better case for us to do something like that with the state.
Couldn't hurt.
Mr. Chair, I think that would still fall in a government agency having some kind of differential preference on the properties rather than just open them up to bid. And so I think it's worth looking at myself to see if, like, to add to our recreational or for affordable housing or things that we want to work with, that it wouldn't just be a potluck deal. If the legislature would allow looking at something to see if we couldn't get some kind of preference from the state for rural counties.
And I told,
That would all work in the same bowl of soup.
and I hear what you're saying. The difference would be is we're rolling in a federal agency that wants out of where they're at. And I think it might give us a little higher standing in the state to be cooperating with another agency like that. Not just the, you know, hey, Gila County, we want it for, you know, whatever it is, but there's actually another need that would go along with ours.
A whole nother can of worm. I believe the original fairgrounds, and I don't think we'll have that option at this point, but I do not believe that the original fairgrounds went to auction. That it was an arrangement with the state land department, and it was deeded over for fair market value, appraised value, but that there were deed restrictions that had to be used for the fairgrounds essentially and government purposes like that. So I don't know that we could rely on that, but that, you know, maybe that's something we push through the state legislature and just get a specific saying, say land department, you're going to sell to Gila County this property for this amount of money. That may be a way to get through the state legislature, which you would turn to Andy for.
Andy can work his magic.
Handiwork his magic and get that property deeded to us for fair market value.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I made it through that conversation without Jessica getting after me.
She was squirming.
Stevie, what do you think?
Yeah, just listening, it seems a little silly in a way, but to make it so confusing. So either the state is willing to sell it or it's not. So if they say, well, go ahead and fill out all the paperwork, apply for all that, and go through all the motions, and then, well, no, we're not going to sell it now. And either it's for sale or it's not for sale. Either it's available or it's not available. So it's like going in and getting an appraisal on a home and then saying, would you sell your house? It's out of order. They need to have some kind of a thing that said, well, if you go through all these motions, then the property will be available. It's not like it's the only property within 100 miles. To me, it's just like a place where scorpions live. So I just don't understand why they're using it as some kind of a, you know, super valuable thing they have to protect or something, and then look at it in 10 years.
Mr. Chairman,
Willing to sell it to us or not, either way.
all state land is up for sale, supposedly.
Yeah.
It's a matter of whether they'll want to work it or not. It's just a matter of internal, what do they feel like today? They told us we're going to wait for 10 years, but then I've had subsequent conversations with them over the last 2 or 3 months, and that we are pushing forward on that to continue to have those discussions with the state land department to continue looking at that, and we're continuing to push forward that we're going to acquire the land, and that's our intent.
Good.
On the last direction we've had from you as a board.
It should be pretty obvious to somebody that, well, the fairgrounds is there, this is adjacent, they're going to develop it, it's a positive, positive, positive. So I don't know, it just seems like an easy decision to me.
Oh, government.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just to clarify, yeah, it's not the sale or sell. It's if we open that can of worms, we pay all the costs to get that property up for sale. And then it's up for bid to the highest bidder. So the question is could we as a government get a special preference from the state that if we put all that money in, that we get some kind of benefit for that, rather than we go through all the MEPA studies, for instance, or whatever for this property.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the extent of those costs will be. But then they say, okay, it's up for sale and all the expenses have been paid. Now it's up to bid to the highest bidder, whether it's a private individual or a government entity. And so, yeah, I think that that's kind of where Mr. Minlove is going, is should we try to reach to the state that if we're going to put forth all the money and jump through all the hoops, that it's not just open to potluck after we have spent
Right.
those expenses.
Right.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Christian, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Third one, we're gonna continue to take a look at this. We'll communicate with you and put together documentation by August 7th for both, the first time, the DIFA money, this one, and potentially have that so it's submitted to the state legislature. We'll have continuing conversations of whether we actually go forward or not, because this is just so we can potentially have something on August 7th. And the last one that I wanted to bring up was, unless there are others that the board want to discuss, is property taxes and having cash payments and no record of who's making cash payments for property tax.
Well, a lot of that is not just to keep track of who's paying property taxes. But where I am is blight is one of my big things. And as I have been sitting here and investigating blight, it seems that a lot of these really, really bad places, and I've got lots of pictures and I can obtain a lot more, is that the property owners have passed away. And it hasn't gone through any process. And so a nephew or a niece or grandson, somebody is paying the property taxes on that particular property to prevent it from going into a tax lien sale. So therefore, when our code enforcement agents go to that particular property and find violations, there's no one to assign those violations to because the property owner has deceased. So whoever's living there, unless it's through the health department, isn't necessarily responsible. And depending on whether the county attorney will back us in that or not, then our hands are pretty much tied. So where I'm at, and I'll continue further, is also too in the blight research. I have gone to the treasurer's office, and I have found, because I have had complaints on properties, and some of these properties have gone into a tax lien sale. So these huge corporations have been paying the taxes on this property, and it has reached the maturity date that they can foreclose on this property and own the property. But they're not. They're continuing to pay taxes on these properties, but they are not owning them because they're not foreclosing on them, which is still binding this property with no one responsible for that property. So as I've found these, where I'm at is to simplify it, is to go to the state, and if you are paying taxes on a property, everybody here that owns a property, if you're paying taxes on it, you're liable. That's just the rule of thumb. So I don't care if you're somebody's nephew that has deceased. When you go pay the property taxes, your name and address and phone number, your information is taken there, and you become liable for that property because you're paying taxes on it. And also too, if you're a huge corporation and you're gobbling up these properties through tax lien sales, and you're not foreclosing on this property to get someone in that property or that property to be sold for someone who cares about the property to take care of it, because in these neighborhoods we have properties that are just horrid that are owned by these corporate or tied up by these corporations who have paid taxes on them, gone through that, but not foreclosed on the property after the date of maturity. And so where we're at is where it'd just be easy if state legislature said, I don't care if you're a huge corporation, I don't care if you're the deceased person's grandson, if you're paying taxes on a property in the state of Arizona, you're liable for that property, because we have an awful lot of blighted properties that are tied up, that my hands are tied, because I can't stop these fire hazards in the middle of neighborhoods. I can't stop these blighted properties in these neighborhoods because of greediness or lack of ownership. And so, that's all.
So, I guess I don't understand this. I thought if you pick up a piece of property for taxes, you pay the taxes until whatever time it is, that at the end of that time, it automatically is yours. I didn't know you,
To foreclose on that property.
oh, okay.
And if you do not, you continue.
You just continue paying the
keep
tax?
that property held up to where somebody else can't have that property. But from my understanding, if you don't foreclose on that property, it just doesn't automatically become yours. You have to foreclose upon it in order for it to become yours.
I guess I have a hard time seeing why somebody would do that, pay taxes like that, and then just continue to pay taxes, without foreclosing and taking it. I don't understand that, I guess, but,
Yeah, it's beyond me, but like I said, when I went to find out who owned the property at the treasurer's office, there's huge corporations that have multiple properties that they can foreclose upon and have not.
My question is why would we have people buying all the properties downtown Globe, downtown Miami, and use them for storage warehouses? Right?
Well, I don't care as long as they're liable for their, I don't care who owns it or what they're using it for, as long as it's not becoming a blighted property. As long as there's an owner that I can go to and write them a citation for violation, I don't care who owns them or what they do with them. It's the blighted properties that my hands are tied in my neighborhoods that I gotta call the neighbor and say, you know, I'm real sorry, but there's a huge corporation that hasn't foreclosed on the property, so there's nothing I can do, other than, you know, call me and I'll call the fire department when it starts on fire. You know, my hands are tied, and that's horrible for me to try to help people and can't because there's no owner to write a violation citation to.
so I guess what you're wanting to do is push it to where, one, if they are paying the taxes on a piece of property where it shows the owners is deceased, that we have records of who's paying those taxes. And then secondly, that when it's all said and done, that it is closed on and they are the owners, they are the ones responsible for it. That's what I'm hearing from you?
Yes, as well as if you're paying taxes on a tax lien sale, you're liable for that, whether you foreclose upon it or not, whether it takes 3 years to get through it or not. If you're paying taxes on a property in state of Arizona, you're liable for it.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just wondering how this is gonna work.
Yeah, well, like I said, if you're paying taxes on a property in the state of Arizona, you're liable for it. I don't, you know, that, to me, that's how it would work. I mean, you own property, you're liable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody that owns property is liable, so if you're paying property taxes on something, you're liable. Why should they be any different than any other property? That's just where I'm at with it.
That one could get real interesting.
Good.
Both these last ones could get real interesting. Those were the 3 items I wanted to discuss, unless there's others that you as a board individually or I don't know if you necessarily have had an opportunity to discuss things collectively, but any other issues that you would like to see taken to the County Supervisors Association or individually through Andy and Todd.
I don't have any right now, James. You know, I'm kind of sitting on the sidelines watching, see what the OHV proposals are going to be, what comes out of that. But, and there again on that one in particular, I know there's other counties that have the same issues we do, but also like game and fish. But so I don't know what's going to come up with that one. Are you good?
I'll explore OHV and see what's going on with that. I know we always have, been a discussion in the last few years about short-term rentals and taxation of short-term rentals, which have not gone anywhere with the state legislature. I'm not sure why, but perhaps it's considered it's a new tax. And any tax, anything that's considered however remotely as a new tax is not going anywhere with this state legislature. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So does that wrap it up for your proposals, legislative proposals?
Unless you have.
Are we good?
I'm good.
Steve, are you good?
I am. Yeah, I can't think of anything else to ask about, but, because there's hundreds, there's over 1,000 bills that come through, so, this is just a synopsis of CSA, and so it's, some of them seem to have a good idea, some of them don't, and then some of them, will have a more of a benefit in that county than this county, and so it's requires quite a bit of juggling, so I appreciate Andy and Todd for what they do, though, really do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, if that's the case, we'll move on to number 3B, information discussion regarding the Finance Department's opportunities to improve services for Gila County departments and elected offices to include information accessibility. Good morning, Maren.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Supervisors. I would request that we table this. I meant to table it before it got to the agenda, and it didn't. So
Okay.
if possible, if we could push this out to probably the September or October work session would be best.
There's one of you two.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to table 3C on our agenda,
3B.
3B.
Yeah.
3B on our agenda.
And I will second that.
Having a motion and second, all in favor, do so by saying aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. See you in
Thank you.
September or October on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Maren. On to 3C, information discussion regarding Gila County ordinance restrictions to include zoning, building, grading, drainage, deeds, etc. Randy, did you bring dinner for all of us?
I'm hoping to go quick, sir.
Uh-huh.
Literally 10 seconds ago, I just got a text that my house in Dewey is on the go status. So, from the grapevine fires.
Oh,
So they're gathering the chickens and the dogs as we speak, and we're trying to get them moved. So, as you know, we're looking at new ordinance for planning and zoning, and I'll probably be in front of you each month going forward in these work sessions on some topics. The first one was restrictions, and it was just people asking where all this stuff comes from and all this stuff that goes along with it. So the first part there is different types of restrictions. It's basically all the ordinances that the Board of Supervisors have approved through the years if they have not been changed. And that includes zoning, building, flood, greening and drainage. There's also state, federal, and other local ADOT things that come into play. And then there's private, where there's deed restrictions, CC&Rs and stuff that go along with parcels of land. And some of the questions is, who can enforce restrictions? The Gila County departments that Board of Supervisors authorize, code enforcement, building, flood, grading and drainage, they can enforce their ordinances. State and federal can also come out and enforce theirs. And that gets into, sometimes there's crossover, sometimes there's not. Right-of-ways and everything that come into play. Sometimes a parcel has a right-of-way for ADOT, so we're enforcing parts of our ordinance on the property, but then the right-of-way becomes ADOT, so we have to work together and come up with a solution there. Then there's the private HOAs that enforce their own restrictions and deal with all that. One of the things that people don't realize is neighbors can enforce these also. So a neighbor can come and enforce a deed restriction on a property forever. And that's been some problems in the past. And, you know, one neighbor didn't care, but the next new owner does. And that's one of the things we've talked about several times with the attorneys, is how we deal with all that and moving forward. Oops, sorry. Didn't flip my page.
Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt with one question real quick?
Go ahead.
So Randy, on the deed restrictions, where does the county play into that? You said, well, we're kind of looking at that, whatever. So, and I know we're dealing with some of that right now up in the Strawberry area. So there's a deed restriction on a property. At what level do we enforce or adhere to or accommodate that?
Very good question. It's been brought up several times. We don't enforce it. We can use it for our decision-making process. So in other words, when we go to planning and zoning, we go to Board of Adjustments, or we come to you, we're giving you all of that information. The only time that we truly investigate whether there's deed restrictions or not is when they're asking to go outside of the ordinance. So they're asking for you to approve a special ordinance just for that piece of property. And that's when we look at everything, all right? We look at deed restrictions, we look at everything around them, what land use, what the comprehensive plan use, and you'll see we're going through all that. What all of that entails, and is this fit those criterias, so when we bring it to you and we present that to you in a CUP or other things, that we're giving you all the information you need to make your decision. Now, you're not going to enforce their deed restrictions, but you can make your decision based on their deed restrictions. Now, in speaking with the attorney, we can incur, and Jeff, obviously correct me if I'm wrong, we can incur some liability by approving someone that has deed restrictions that are against what we're approving. So in other words, your property says you are for residential only and you want to put a business there. And they come to us and you're not even zoned to have a business there, but you're asking for that. So you're asking for a special approval for your piece of property different than anyone else's. And that's when we look at those deed restrictions. Now, if the person is making a decision based on our approval, there can be some liability. And we're kind of passing the buck that now we're forcing the neighbors to incur the cost to enforce the deed restrictions, which the people who own the land have already agreed to when you sign that you're buying this. You've already signed that you're going to follow those rules. And as Jeff has told us, that's basically a private contract. And now we're forcing your neighbors to incur that cost to enforce, because they bought their land based on that there was not going to be a business next door to them. And you're forcing them to, not forcing, but the opportunity is that they're going to have to sue on their own to stop that guy's business to make sure he follows what he said he would do. We have had with the Board of Adjustments where we've gotten a judge's order that we've had to go back and reverse a variance because we approved something that was against a deed restriction. Now, we may not be liable financially. I mean, I guess there's always that chance, but the judge can order us to do a lot of things, and then the person can sue us. And even in defending that, if we want it, you still have the legal team and everyone else and staff time cost in defending us to say, well, it's not really our responsibility, but we ignored it and we went on. So on your specific case, there is deed restrictions that some neighbors have already brought up that they're looking for us to do what they think we should do. And they don't want to sue, but they're willing to. And that's not good for the neighborhood, and which means it's not good for Gila County. You don't want neighbors fighting nonstop over stuff that could have been stopped or slowed or made certain stipulations to protect everyone, not only the person who's wanting to do what they want to do, but also the neighbors when they bought that land, what they expected to be next to their neighbors. And that's one of the things here that we talked about is people buy land in areas for their zoning. You know, not always. A lot of people hate zoning, and I understand that. There's days I do. But when you buy a piece of property and you see the neighborhood you're in, you're buying into that neighborhood. And now when we turn around and say, you want to put a business there now, and you bought in the middle of a neighborhood, that's really not harmonious with that area, and that's not really what the neighbors bought in for. You know, if you want a business, put it on the road, put it out on the highway, go to a commercially zoned area. The comprehensive plan shows all of those areas, and it depends on which neighborhood you're in. It'll tell you exactly what you got. All of our zoning's on the website. So if anyone has questions, you know, we deal with phone calls daily. People asking, okay, here's what I want to do. So to get back to your question, we're not responsible to enforce it, but staff's feeling is that we should want to give you that information for you to make your decision, then you make your decision. All the stuff coming up until we come to you is all recommendations. The P&Z Commission is only doing research and trying to find everything they can so that when we come to you, we have given you all the information you can find, or that we can find, for you to make your decision. So it all comes down to the Board of Supervisors, and you guys make your decisions one way or the other. So
Okay.
did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, very thoroughly. So, yeah, my point is, though, that we do have in process a way of changing the zoning or the use of a property through that process. Otherwise, you would just say, oh, you're zoned for this, end of discussion.
Correct.
So we already have that process in place. I just wanted to know how much power the deed restriction had in that. Because if we're notifying within 300 feet, then that would be the time to come forward and say, well, you know, that's a deed restriction, and it doesn't necessarily negate the process. It just is a consideration.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And the problem that we've ran into is a neighborhood, everyone's extremely friendly, doesn't ever want to, you know, disturb their neighbors, and so they don't have a problem. You know, even though the deed restriction says no business, they were okay with having a business there. But because there's a deed restriction that's recorded on that land, the next two owners might not have an issue, but that third owner does. And my understanding, liability-wise, that neighbor can come at that point, you know, 10 years down the line, and still enforce that deed restriction. And from what I've seen so far, most of the judges, that's a contract. Good, bad, or indifferent, that was what that was designed for. Now, I will say I've seen some deed restrictions that are a little off. One I just saw recently says if you're sick, you can't buy the land. I'm okay, but you know, it's a little off. I don't know if they're talking about a flu or anything else. I mean, there are some deed restrictions that I think are not useful, but that wasn't my decision. That's just what was on that property and that the people signed for when they bought the property. I will agree with you 1,000% that I was guilty, most people don't look at deed restrictions when they buy the land. It was a good price, it's close to where they want it to be. They have a plan in your head when you first buy it, and that's just what you want to do. Surprisingly enough, for the amount of money people spend on these things, they don't do much investigation. It's, I can afford this in this area that I want to be, and I want to do blank, and a little bit of research can go a long way in saving a lot of headaches. But going forward with how the restrictions can help Gila County, obviously there's protects public health, safety, general welfare, again, just neighbors having a standard expectation of what's going to be their neighbor. You know, you're not planning on a pig farm next to you. It also deals with first responders and making sure there's a proper exiting, a couple ways in and out, so when there is a fire, it's not dealt with and something's blocked because a guy wanted to put something across the right of way, which we were never planning on building, but now they've blocked an exit. There are also certain developments that are used for infill, right? If we have things, when they come to you guys with, I'm meeting tomorrow with a gentleman that wants to put 300 houses into a subdivision out in Thompson Draw. You know, you guys have a plan for that, and it's in the master plan that's been voted on. That, you know, that's a housing area that this is designed for. It's not designed for a shopping center. And the citizens of Gila County have voted on our master plan, and that's what was decided. Obviously, it goes through a long list of things to get to that point, but that's important. Again, people invest in areas that they like and want and have a reasonable expectation that it's going to stay like that. Gila County can encourage, you know, some of the options we can encourage workforce housing. You know, you don't want to put that in next to the $1 million houses, but you want to put it in where there's maybe the smaller houses. So where those kind of things where we can help get everyone working harmoniously with the direction and meeting the master plan. Again, we make them sign, even if you come in for a building permit, they come in and sign that they don't have deed restrictions that stop them from doing what they want to do. Again, they may not know. I will tell you, since planning, I've been dealing with planning zoning now, that about 40% of stuff that people come in for are actually outright against their deed restrictions. And I've had people that come in and wrote in the deed restrictions. I have one gentleman up in Strawberry who wrote the deed restrictions for his neighborhood. He came in and asked to do something. We said, okay, and took the paperwork in and did deed restrictions, called him up, says, what do you want to do? You said you couldn't do. He goes, oh, I forgot about that, and withdrew his paperwork. Because he wrote those and all the other neighbors had to comply with it. So not everyone knows, and that's especially when they're asking for something outside of the norm or our ordinances and the laws that you guys have voted on. That's when we really do check, just again to give everyone, the citizens, the applicant, P&Z Commission, and you all the information that we possibly can to ensure that you're making the decision. You know, I don't want you to come back and say, I wish you would have told me this. That is something I have heard, and other things happen, and I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want you to say that to me. So I'm trying to give you all the information I can. So some of the bad things about deed restrictions, or not deed restrictions, but just restrictions, is it may limit what someone wants to do, right? They planned on building this Taj Mahal house, 5 stories tall. It was just, but the deed restrictions, and we ran into this, it said 2 stories. And the neighbors, you know, all built to 2 stories. It's all on hills. It's all stuff. They don't want this guy's looking down on them. They didn't build next to him planning on having some guy looking down on them. So it can prohibit that. It can put those neighbors, again, arguing more. They argue enough now, I will promise you that. We really don't want to give them more reasons to argue and do that. again, it can decrease someone's property value. You know, that's a hard thing to say, but, you know, if you have these houses and you've invested in these properties, and some guy comes next to you and starts putting jet ski rentals in downtown Strawberry, that's not gonna help your value, and can affect your pocketbook. So we do look at those kind of things when we are taking anything forward, is can it be considered harmonious with the area? And I know that's just a phrase word that a lot of people throw out there, and yes and no, and how do you determine that? And those are all very valid questions. But we do look, staff does look very hard at what we're bringing forward, that I can turn around and say, when I come to you, this is or it isn't. And then again, that's only my recommendation. Again, it's up to Board of Supervisors to make those decisions. So as staff's directions was that we were planning on continuing, unless during this conversation you direct us somewhere different. Staff wants to provide all the information to all the boards that are needed. Again, Gila County is not responsible. We don't, in CC&Rs, that's been brought up before too with HOAs. That is not a deed restriction. That is a group of people got together and voted something. We don't even get involved with those at all. We will write the board if you're asking for a variance or something outside the norm in an area and it's in an HOA. We'll write the board, even if they're outside of that 300 feet, we'll still write them and bring their response back to you. But we don't know if the rules were brought together legally. The deed restrictions they're recorded. So we don't get involved with the CC&Rs. And people want us to sometimes, and then they want us to, depends on which side you're on, they don't want us to have anything to do with us, and staff has nothing to do with that, and we don't plan on it. Again, staff is just planning to deal with this process as we have been, unless we find you want to go in a different direction. And my next slide is, do you have any questions for me?
On CC&Rs, Randy, some of those were put back in place a long time ago, and those boards are gone. And then what do you do?
Again, we're not enforcing those, not even looking those up. But you're right, there are some associations that have went defunct, which does make it very hard because the deeds will tell you how you can change any of that stuff, or the CC&Rs will tell you how you can change any of that stuff. And the hard part is short-term rentals.
Yep.
There are a lot of out-of-state owners here, and the only way you can usually change something is you got to get to that magic number, whatever it is, 51% or 60% or whatever it is. So you start sending out these letters to everyone, trying to get them to sign. They have to go get it notarized, and if you're sending this to a guy in New York who's just getting rental money, the odds of him really caring are pretty small. So it's an uphill battle. But again, if you were researching that before you purchased your property, you would know that association's defunct, and you would have to make that decision at that point whether you want to deal with that or not. A lot of deed restrictions are old. I mean, they were done when it was platted. The current one that we've talked about started in 1960. Then it expired in 1990, and it says if we don't change this, that automatically renews for 10 years at a time. And I will tell you, I've seen a lot of those restrictions. That's what it says, because they want those. I mean, they unless you went through the process of changing them, they don't want those to go off. So they keep renewing automatically, and they're there. And I will tell you, in the last month, I've had 2 new things that I have ran into. One, learning how to get rid of deed restrictions. And I have another area where they're trying to put deed restrictions on after the fact. So I have been learning and educating and spending a lot of time with Mr. Dalton on the phone on what legally has to happen and deal with all that stuff. So it's been interesting, which
So,
keeps,
so that's interesting to me, because so if I buy a piece of property that doesn't have any deed restrictions on it, there's actually been cases where after that, they've tried to come back and impose deed restrictions over the top of you?
the one I'm talking about had deed restrictions in 1960, they expired in 1990, but they did not have the automatic renewal clause on there. And one of the things was you were not allowed to rent. And there were neighbors trying to buy houses for short-term rentals, and that's not what this neighborhood wanted. So they were trying to figure out how to reinstate those after they've expired and are gone. And I told them to go talk to a real estate lawyer and pursue that through a legal system, because we wouldn't be involved when the plat was approved. You guys saw the deed restrictions, you saw they were gonna expire, and that was the decision that was made at that time.
Right. Yeah, cause that, you know, you're absolutely right. On a lot of these chunks of property back in the day, they put the deed restrictions on them. And in some cases, those deed restrictions, they're just outdated. They're, you know, for the times today, some of them. And so it can get really sticky. And you're absolutely right, where not everybody looks into it that far. And not all real estate agents will tell you that either. That's the other side of that coin.
Yes,
And
sir.
so yeah, as buyers, you do have to be pretty leery and do your homework.
And where we ran into it, you know, everything's electronic now.
Mm-hmm.
So the one individuals that have bought some property that found out they couldn't do what they wanted to do, they went back to their real estate and said, oh yeah, we sent it to you in an email, and here's the link, and here's what you said that you read it. And then they try to open the link 2 years later. Well, that link may or may not work anymore. And they said they never saw it. And I would not disbelieve that. But I will say the real estate guy had his signature that said they read all that. So, you know, he kind of had to live with that. But he didn't even know what they were still, because he couldn't open whatever link now through electronic means. So we sent him to the assessor. The assessor has all that. And that's who we go to, is to the assessor, to get a list of any deed restrictions that there are. Some land there is none. That's great. Then we just say that. And when I come to you or any other of my boards, we found no deed restrictions, and give them all the information that we can other than that.
Cool. Is that it?
Any questions that I can answer at this moment?
Supervisor Humphrey?
Well, I've had a lot of questions as if we've gone, but then it keeps going, and so, I guess my first question is deed restrictions. You said you don't look at the deed restrictions unless someone is wanting an overlay or something that comes to the board for a decision. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We make them sign
That,
that
that's
they,
okay, that's okay, but that's the only time you, as planning and zoning, look at a deed restriction.
correct.
Okay. My 2 cents worth is, because as you throw a rock in a pond, it ripples. If anyone buys a piece of property, they're responsible for that piece of property and all the permits, everything that was done before or not. Once they purchase that property, they're responsible for it. So if at one point in time, Gila County gave someone a permit that was against a deed restriction and they purchased that property as is, then they become liable for that deed violation that they weren't aware of. And so where I'm at is, if this is a discussion on where we go, I would like to see Gila County look at deed restrictions before issuing any permit. Whether we have a violation or not, then that's only fair, because like you say, people don't look at it. Well, if we're giving them a permit to do something, I think, in my opinion, it would be the responsible thing for us to look at the deed restrictions before we issue someone a permit to do something. That's my 2 cents worth. Because then that person can hire an attorney or do whatever they need to do to change
that restriction upon them. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So being that they have an out and a responsibility as a property owner to not be in violation of their deed, and they can change whatever their deed restrictions are prior to coming to us for a permit. And so, yeah, just to cut through the, my 2 cents is I would think, as to be responsible, Gila County should look at the deed restrictions prior to issuing any permit, whether it be residential, commercial, or whatever. And then if not, it's like, it's a violation of the deed restriction, and here's the information that you need to change your deed restriction before bringing a permit to us, or a set of plans to us for a building permit. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Randy. So I would just have to say that community development is one of our most complicated and active parts of the county. And I appreciate all of the efforts that you do and have your department. And you probably don't have enough people to handle everything that's going on. Growth in the county in certain areas is much more than others. And so we're dealing with past, present, future. And so I look at the department as needing to be somewhat fluid. So right now, I'm not recommending that there's anything that you change that you're doing personally. I'm saying, you're asking that question, right? Should we just continue going the way we're going, or unless you have something else? So the something else comes up in the future. So we're talking about Porta-Johns right now in Pine, Strawberry. That's coming up. We'll talk about that. Your next topic is going to be talking about, what do we do about this situation? And, we got food vendors, portable food vendors. Are they portable? Are they permanent? Are they this and that? As culture changes and as time changes, and as it was pointed out, deed restrictions that's 70 years old, part of our process is to say, can a property owner apply for some different usage, as we call it, a violation of the ordinance? So they're asking for that. And so the violation of the ordinance, to me, I don't know why we would put a deed restriction above or as more important as a liability issue than just the decision to change the usage in general anyway. So that's the way I look at it. So if we put the deed restriction as so important that we shouldn't even look at any changes, then what's the point of having the mechanism of change in the first place? If you understand what I'm trying to say. So
And I will.
If the 300-foot people, they don't have any problem with the deed restriction, they don't complain, they don't even bring it up, then to me that's the public speaking. And that sometime down the future, 10 years from now, they wouldn't be able to bring that up again, in my opinion. But I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know.
No, fantastic.
People can sue. People can sue for whatever they want.
And that's true.
Yeah.
And we don't put it higher, we're just informing you in your decision-making process.
Sure.
If you decide that's an old deed restriction that makes no sense, and you approve, at the end of the day, at the end of the meeting, I get the paperwork that says it's approved, and we will deal with that as we go forward. If you decide that that's something that is relevant and should be denied, then you make your votes that way, and we deal with it that way. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
The only thing I was gonna say, was there something in here that we were gonna discuss about grading and drainage? Or-
No, just that's one of the restrictions that are out there is G&D
Okay.
also.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
if you're getting ready to leave this subject, I wanted to clarify 2 things.
you bet, Jeff.
Okay. So, Randy mentioned that we've been talking a lot, and so he mentioned what the law is on a couple of things, but I want to clarify it since you may be thinking that what he said was what I said, since we've talked a lot. On the issue of CCNRs, CCNRs means conditions and covenants, or covenants and conditions, I don't know which comes first. Covenants and conditions running with the land, that's what that means. And if you have an HOA, that means you have an organization that enforces those for everybody. If you don't have an HOA, that means everybody's on their own to enforce their own. So if a homeowners association is in existence and then goes out of existence, it's really independent of the fact that the deed restrictions, which is a shorthand way of saying CCNRs, they're still there. You just don't have an organization that's enforcing them for you. I wanted to clarify that issue. And then early in the presentation, you talked about potential county liability if the county approves a conditional use permit that's contrary to a deed restriction. What's the liability? So I've done a lot of thinking about this. There is a lawsuit that could be brought. I'm not familiar with a case where this has ever been done, and I think they would lose. But it's called tortious interference with contractual relations, which basically means injurious interference with someone else's contract. When you are aware that someone else has a contract and you take action that induces that person to breach that contract, then there's damages, then that person inducing the other person can in some circumstances be liable for damages for that. So the question I was wrestling with is, well, what if the county board of supervisors chooses to encourage people that have deed restrictions to ignore those deed restrictions and those covenants that they've made by granting them a conditional use permit, which permits them to do exactly what they already promised they would not do, is the board of supervisors going to incur liability when that happens? And I think, as we've talked about many times before, someone could bring a lawsuit or something. That doesn't mean that they're going to win it. But there's probably enough of a substance there that they could bring that lawsuit and file it, serve the county. I think it might not be covered by ASIP because of the nature of the arising out of land use regulation. So county attorney's office would defend it, or county would have to hire a private counsel to defend it. Ultimately, I think the county would prevail because these are independent things. The private contract a person has under a deed restriction is independent of the Board of Supervisors' power and capacity to legislate conditional use permits. And you have a right to do that, even if it violates somebody else's contract. You can do it. So I think you'd ultimately win, but you might get sued. It's possible. I want to clarify that issue.
And I want to clarify, I would never want to speak for Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, can I direct a question to Jeff? So, thanks for that. That's very clear. Let's say, though, there is an example of a property that has no CCNRs and no deed restrictions, but is zoned residential, R1, whatever, and then are requesting to change that zoning to something else. Would the county still be in as liable for the change of what the community has the expectation that will never change?
So you're talking, if I understand you correctly, you're saying it's a situation where the board would change zoning.
That everyone clearly purchased property thinking it would never change.
Yeah. I've read language in a case that says that a person, when they buy property, is never able to rely on the zoning of that property remaining permanent. That you always, when you buy property, you always have to anticipate the zoning could change. And so if this board changes zoning on property, there's no liability for that. That's not something you're entitled to have as a permanent situation when you buy property. Zoning is a legislative matter. It's like saying, well, I'm a citizen of Arizona and you can't change the laws. I got sworn as a citizen last week, so the laws have to stay the way they are from now on. Well, no, laws get to be changed all the time through a legislative process, and that's what when you rezone a piece of property, it's a legislative process, and you can do that. And no one can claim that's a violation of their reasonable expectations when they bought property.
Randy, I think we've covered that one good. You ready to go on the next one, or you need to go Dewey?
No, I'm okay.
All right.
I think if the chickens go, the chickens go.
All right, we'll move on to 3D, information discussion regarding recreational vehicles in Gila County as outlined in the Gila County zoning ordinance for unincorporated areas of Gila County. Randy.
So, as you know, that, again, we're working on our planning and zoning ordinance. And this is a topic that, about my first week as director, Homer took me to one of Mr. Humphrey's meetings about RVs, and it hasn't stopped being a hot topic since then. So I think it was a hot topic before I was director, and it will continue, I'm assuming. So a couple of things that I want to make sure everyone is clear on is what a recreational vehicle is. They are built in accordance with NFPA 1192-15 or an ANSI standard A11 or 119-5-15. They are not building codes. They don't meet building codes. They never have. The manufacturer says they're not dwellings. The manufacturer says these are for only temporary recreational camping uses. It's very clear how they're made. As anyone who's ever been in a RV knows, the escape window, about that big, which as you can see does not get me out. I will promise you I will get out, but maybe not just through that window. But they don't meet, sleeping areas. They have one fire alarm usually in there, and it's usually by the kitchen, because that's usually in the middle. And when they stop, it's not required that those pop-outs come out. So now you're down to usually about an 18-inch walkway, getting through there when it's parked, or if you're pulling over for the night, you're just stopping. There's a lot of things that come up that they do not meet building codes. So in turns, the manufacturer, the federal, the state, and local say they are not dwellings. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that there is a big difference between, there's $1 million RV parks. You go to NASCAR, and there's a whole long row of those things, and they don't meet as a dwelling. I mean, they've got marble floors and chandeliers and everything else, and they still don't meet the requirements of a dwelling. And then, according to the manufacturer, they're not safe to live in as a dwelling. They're safe to come in and spend a few nights in. I just want to make sure that when we talk about this topic, that where we're coming from. And there's all kinds of different RVs. I mean, everyone's invented. You've got trailers with, multiple porches on them now, and roof entertainment sessions. You've got park models that look really great, and we make subdivisions out of them. We've got the $1 million ones that drive down the road and are shiny, and they're pulling a big trailer or a Jeep or whatever it is. You got the little thing on the back of a pickup truck. Those are all recreational vehicles, and none of them meet the standards to be lived in permanently. So I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, and that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. So you're talking about the driving one, a pull behind, a sit on the back of a truck. We have people that try to put a camping shell on top of a trailer and then put their quad next to it and call that an RV. And you can do that. You can take it down to ADOT, and they will license it as a recreational vehicle. I will say that one question that everyone asks is, what is temporary? very good question. I really wish I could provide you an answer. Everyone has different interpretations of what temporary is. So when it says that a recreational vehicle is for temporary use or for recreational use, I wish I could tell you that means this. The manufacturer has it in an enclosed statement. When they did the ANSI standards that can't get to, they won't tell you. The feds say it's 14 days. It's why you can, when you go camping at a federal park, you're supposed to move every 14 days. Whether they enforce that or not, it's another thing. So I can't tell you what temporary is. And I can't tell any customer that comes to our counter what temporary is. All I can say is it's not made as a dwelling. And per Gila County, our zoning ordinance, they're not dwelling, and they can't be an ADU, additional dwelling unit. It can't be a mother-in-law's quarters, per our zoning ordinance. Under our current interpretation, and we've dealt with this before, under GU, is generally unclassified district. It says that it is made for farm, non-farm, residential uses, farms, ranches, recreational and commercial uses. Pretty much covers everything. Well, prior interpretations, nowhere does it say this in our ordinance, but prior interpretations was, because we said there was some recreational in the farm and commercial and the non-farm and the residential, that means they can have RVs on their property. And we have in Gila County, and I'm going to misquote this, we have about 3,000 properties that are GU. About 1,000 are in Tano, and the rest are spread out. So it's kind of a concentrated area, but off the control road, there's a lot of GU up there. And again, don't quote me on that exact number. I had it at one point, but my brain stopped with what that number was. So the prior interpretation was recreational use, so out there by the lake, everyone should be able to have it, even if you're not GU. And that's ran into some problems because we have some R1L out there, which is residential 1 limited, which is about our strictest zoning. It says you can't use one, you can't look at one, you can't get a TUP for one. Whatever reasons when that was written, that was what was decided for that area. We've all dealt with people that try to bring it says no manufactured home, no mobile home, no recreational vehicle. And when people bring in something pre-built, I've dealt with some of the supervisors on projects where they're getting complaints because they had something built off-site and they considered that manufacturer. Well, it was built off-site, but it met the building code, and there were certain things that came in that allowed it to go into an R1L. But they're the most restrictive. So we have go from you can't use this, even if you're building your house, an R1L, you're not allowed to live per the zoning in an RV, period, to where we've interpreted where GU says have one, live in it all day long, and there's no restrictions. So pretty wide path there in dealing with that. And as you know, we came about a month ago, someone wanted to have 2 RVs on a GU piece of property, and that would require a T overlay. So T is just trailer overlay. Well, under our ordinance, 1 RV is 1, 2 is an RV park. So anywhere in our zoning, once you get to 2, you need to apply for a T overlay because now you have an RV park. And some people like RV parks, some people don't. Again, Wiz bringing that information to you. As you see on the bottom of this page, that talks about the R1L there, which is very restrictive. A lot of that area is pine strawberry, but down by Roosevelt, there's some R1L. They're kind of spread all over. and, you know, where we're going. All right. So again, currently in our ordinance, we reference recreational vehicles very few times. We talk about them in definitions. We talk about them in RV park definitions. And then in single-family rural district, we talk about how you can use one and store for storage only. We talk about it in R1L where it says you can't have them. And then we talk about them in a T overlay. And then we talk about them in a temporary use permit. And that's basically saying, and this shows you on how things can become out of date, it says that you can get a TUP if you have a permit for your house in everywhere but R1L. You can live in an RV while you're constructing your house, and that can do for 6 months out of a year. Back when you used to be able to get your house built in 6 months, that worked. Nowadays, our ordinance specifically says 6 months. We have come, and it does say I can take it to the Board of Adjustments, I believe, and get that extended, and we have done that. But we also don't want them living in that after they've got their C of O on their property. So we just limit it to when they get their C of O. So as big as time, and I know I've talked to all the supervisors in some capacity on this, recreational vehicles is a big thing, and I will tell you, I meet with the county directors. It's a big thing everywhere. Some are much more restrictive than we are, and some are much less restrictive than we are. So it's kind of a gamut. But it is an issue, and I know Supervisor Humphrey, I do have tiny homes on here, because I know you've talked about wanting to do tiny homes. But some of the concerns with this is also the safety risk. Again, they're not made to be a dwelling. We have a lot of people that are using them as short-term rentals. And so they're renting these out to people to come up, and as we know, there's a lot of short-term rental individuals that don't treat stuff as nicely, but they try to put 2 or 3 on their property, and then they rent them out, and now the neighbors are not happy because all the noise, the fire, and the cars, and the vehicles, and everything else that go along with that. So that is an issue. Aesthetic issues and compatibility with RVs. Again, I have not personally seen one of those $1 million RVs here in Gila County, but they do exist. We have some very nice ones, but a lot of them are, you know, I've got people right now that are permitting bringing up 1987 single wides that are RVs. So there may or may not be the most aesthetically pleasing, and how supervisors want to deal with that, that's a question up for. Enforcing the compliance is very difficult. I don't know how long you've been there. I don't know, you know, you say you come up and you only stay on the weekend. That's funny that I caught you there on Wednesday, but you can have a different weekend than I do. But, you know, I don't rent this out, but the guy shows me the rental agreement that he paid you to use this RV. So it's a very difficult thing to enforce. Prices nowadays are insane for housing. And that causes shortages, that causes concerns. Then we also run into the tax issue. I had the assessors draw me up a little table. If you put a septic system and power on a piece of property, and I used half acre, you're around $700, and you know, obviously can change in different areas, but the ones I had them run, it's around $700 in taxes. You put a house on there, you're around $1,800 to $2,500 in taxes. Now you put an RV next to that home, you're paying 700 because we don't count RV as anything to the property. And someone put their home on there, and they're all getting the same services. So they're getting the same sheriff, same roads, same everything. And this guy's paying, worst case scenario, around 2,500, and this guy's paying 500 or 700, depends on where he's at. Some people don't think that's fair. That's the decision that the board's going to have to make down the line on how you want to deal with that and where you want to go with that. But that is a real scenario that is going on, and they do pay licensing the first time to license that recreational vehicle out, so they did pay some taxes to the state to be able to drive that out. But when they put it on a piece of property, I can't tell you how many times we go and they're not licensed because they're sitting there, right? They're not moving. They're not on the road. The cars are, but the vehicle itself are. So when they paid that first tag to ADOT, they covered getting it there, but then it sits there, and now, you know, RVs are a lot like cars. They start deteriorating in value as soon as you pull them off a lot. And we have a requirement of 1977 or earlier are not allowed to be moved into Gila County. Actually, they're not allowed to be moved into the state, and that's because of their design. Back in 1977, they didn't meet even any codes. They didn't even meet ANSIs or snow loads. And so they all built them with 15-pound snow loads like they were in Phoenix, and then they bring them up here to Pine Strawberry, we have 40-pound snow load, and we get them to collapse, and people can get hurt. So the state has said, they call it pre-HUD, 1977, you're not even allowed to move them on here, but we have them here. And they've lasted the test of time. So, I mean, I don't think it's really fair to say they're not going to hold the snow load, because they have. But I will tell you, they're not the most aesthetically pleasing. The neighbors are complaining. Where we run into an issue is this person who puts the home up, and now we have an RV next to them, and they start bringing their outside storage, and they start bringing their old car that broke down because they don't want to have it in their house in Phoenix or in the valley. And so they start bringing stuff up here, and now they become a storage yard. And then they're only there on the weekends, and then during the summer, they might be here a little bit more, and during the winter, they're here less. So now the neighbor who's put up his $300,000 to $500,000 home is staring at this kind of stuff, and then they can complain, and as you know, our code enforcement responds to complaints, and I would tell you, I'm going to say twice a week minimum, we get complaints about RVs. And a lot of them are in the Tono area. A lot of them are in Strawberry. You know, people that go back, you know, Strawberry's kind of spread out in the back there, and you don't normally drive by everyone, but they put them up there and sneak them in there, and you know, they are storing stuff in them, and there's nothing that says you can't store them. And we've corrected that with some past issues, that you can, not R1L, can't do it there, but you can store an RV, but it becomes an issue of, you know, when all the pop-outs are out, it's hooked to all the utilities, the stairs are out, there's a picnic table in the front, and there's flowers, and there's kids' bikes there, that's not truly storage. Or when they build a patio in front of the RV, I don't know that they're storing their household goods in there anymore. Again, we'll talk real quickly about tiny homes. Tiny homes are allowed in Gila County today. They're almost allowed anywhere. Actually, the newer codes have a whole section just dedicated to tiny homes. But tiny homes aren't built to the code, and they can be considered a dwelling. A lot of the problem that you're running with tiny homes is you have a lot of the expense in a pretty small home. We do have some problems with our zoning in that area. Some of our zoning says you have to build a minimum of 720 square foot to have a dwelling on the property. Most tiny homes are not 720 square feet. Some are between 400 to 600. You know, if you're living in a tiny home mentality and the minimalist that goes along with that. There's a lot of places that will sell you tiny home kits for $100,000, and then you buy your land and you are now about $1,000 a square foot that you have into a tiny home, where you build your own house, you're, you know, 400 a square foot to build it. So there is some problems with that because everything is specially built for a tiny home. You know, you got to have those cupboards built to the right size, and they pull out and they lay down and become a pillow and a footstep and everything else that go along
Mr. Chair,
with
but
it.
isn't that a personal choice?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
No, and like I said, again, they're two code. They become a dwelling, totally legal. The only problem we have is a couple of our zoning says 720 square foot. Other than that, tiny homes can go up anywhere in Gila County except for those specific areas. They can go in R1L because they are a built dwelling. They're not a manufactured home. I know that tiny homes have been brought up before. They are totally allowed except for the size in a couple of our zonings that would go along with that. So again, RVs, you know, the question's been brought up, and it's been brought up many times how we want to deal with this. Staff's recommendations in moving forward are we engage with the stakeholders and talk with all of the I kind of like talking to the real estate people because they're the ones telling people a lot what they can do and not do on their properties, so that we're all clear. You know, the use permit is what we talked about for an RV, that where we could charge for a use permit that would allow an RV to be used on someone's property, that they might be getting up to the same, and I don't know how to say it, but the same tax value as their neighbor who built the house, so that everyone's paying fairly for the services that they're obtaining. So with that, I'm open for any thoughts, questions, concerns.
You ready for this, Randy?
I hope so, sir.
Supervisor Humphrey, lead the charge.
It seems like I get that pleasure. I believe we live in a time that construction is not what it once used to be. I can remember not too long ago that you couldn't get an address in Gila County unless you had plans to build a home. Fought to change that. Okay, we did. I think we're in a time that a lot of us in this area have recreational areas, period. And materials have gone up, property's gone up. I don't believe everyone is going to build a $300,000 home as a recreational on weekends type deal. Also, too, in our economy, I think there's also people that don't have the means to buy or build a home. And so, in my public meetings, I have had a lot of input from people that believe that we should come to some balance of where people can live in something alternative than a stick or mortar built home. And so that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Whether it's a mental home, whether it's a mini home, whether it's a motor home, whether it's an RV. You know, I guess where I'm at is I know my public input. I think you know public input and realtors' input. So I guess I'm looking for recommendations on what the board could do to help come up with something that that could solve some of these problems. And if you have two calls a week on alternative living structures, I'm not gonna say whether they're motorhomes or whatever, and a lot of that is that something that we already have ordinances against, like trash, or they bring all of their junk with them. Well, we have ordinances against junking up your place, whether there's a house there or a fifth wheel. But I do think that at some point in time, my opinion is that we're gonna have to look at some kind of ordinances or some kind of allowance to enable people to be able to live in something other than a stick-built home. And what that picture looks like, you're the one that gets all the complaints. And public input, you know, at my meetings, you said you'd get public input to help us create something to where, because as you say, we've already got people living in them. And so where's that line at is where I'm at. Now, if you want me to help make that decision, I'll get some information to make that decision, or my 2 cents worth. But as a board, we have to pass something. And so I don't, I know my district, I don't know Supervisor Klein's district, I don't know Supervisor Christensen's district and their opinion or what they feel about alternative living other than a stick-built home. But I think at some point in time, we are going to have to allow it, and whether it's taxes, whether it's, a permit, say, okay, if you can't live in it permanently, 4-month permit, 6-month permit, 3-month permit. I mean, but I'm elected to work for the public, and my public has reached out to me that they are asking me to find an option for alternative living other than a stick frame home. And that's where my 2 cents are. And what that picture looks like, I don't know. Do I have some ideas? Yes. But I think in the long run, some of our ordinances were written a long, long time ago. And I think as times change, as people change, we need to alter those. Because 50 years ago, I've seen pull-behind trailers that were built 50 years ago. No one would ever want to live in one. But what they're creating today, even though the manufacturer doesn't say that they're livable, there's a lot of people living in them now yearly. A lot of people have sold their homes and they live in them year-round. They just travel around depending on where the weather suits them. So my 2 cents are that I think at some point in time, we're going to have to come up with a happy medium of what ordinances we have now and what people want to allow alternative living in a recreational area other than a stick-built home. And, Mr. Chair, that's my 2 cents worth.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman. Randy, we've talked a lot about this. It's very difficult to say these are the lines and this is where we don't cross that line. So my opinion is that we have to protect neighborhoods from the blight of perhaps an RV coming in. So you have expensive homes in an area, and then someone buys a vacant lot and now they have a 27-foot RV there. And is that accommodating to the neighborhood? Does it devalue the neighborhood and those considerations? So I'm concerned about that. But I'm also open to the idea that someone might want to use one on occasion, or, you say it can't be continuous. It's not really a home, it's an RV, and I get that totally. But especially like in Supervisor Humphrey's district, I see the lake, environment down there as something where someone wants to buy a piece of property, put an RV on it, and use it on occasion, temporarily, weekends or whatever. It's not continuous. It's not a permanent dwelling. But then we have restrictions on getting them hooked up, so they still have to be working a generator or a non-septic or something like that. And so can we accommodate some of that in certain areas, which is not going to devalue other neighborhoods? And we also have the ability to have areas where a whole entire area can be tiny houses, or a whole entire area can be an RV park. So if you have a trailer park, those people do live in those things permanently. I mean, they can. And so, but that's a different, we zone for that. And
We do put the T overlay for people to have that.
right, so if a developer says, look, I'm buying 20 acres over here, I want to zone it for this usage, then he has the ability to do that. And then if you want to park your trailer there and come up and live there all the time or not, that's up to you. And so we isolate that. And so I see that as a viable option. I totally agree that the expenses of building a home anymore is super bad. So what we're trying to do is say, well, there's some people that can afford to come up and recreate, but they don't want to build a house. So how we get there is probably what you bring to us.
Okay.
But I think you understand my sentiment. Can we have an accommodation in some cases for those people that want to have a boat parked and drive up, live in an RV, and take their boat down to the lake?
So, am I allowed to ask questions? Do you think that should be across all zoning districts? Under the GU for recreational, or in R1L, I mean, not R1L, that's specific, but R1, TR, all those. So do you see it across all the districts, or do you see it in GU?
No, I don't see it a one-size-fits-all. I don't see it across everyone, because I think some people do purchase into a certain zoning to say, I know I'm not going to see that next to me. But there's probably some other areas that are a little bit more relaxed when it's they build a shop or whatever. They don't have a house, but they got a shop. And I can see, as Americans like the freedom to be able to use their stuff, your property. And so I can say, you say, well, you can't do it here, but over in this area, it's zoned for something like what you're talking about doing.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay.
You good?
I don't know. I think so.
Good discussions, Randy, and I bet you all can already guess my input on this one, but it is a tough topic, because there are a lot of hardworking people out there that they can't afford anything but that. And then you've got the people that, well, they don't like their neighbors, and the way to ding them is to complain about them being in an RV right there. You've got those calls too, I know you do.
Oh, yes.
And so it isn't, when we talk about issues, it isn't just always somebody being mad because someone's living in an RV. It could be over something else. I've always been a big proponent of, you own your property, you do what you want as long as you're not hurting your neighbor or neighbors. And that can be pretty wide. That can be aesthetics. It could be other things as well. So I think when it really gets down to this, and I'm not saying we don't need to look at it, we do. We need to take a real hard look at it, see. And do I think it, one thing would fit all of our zoning? I don't think so either. I kind of agree with that. The GU part of it, yes, but and we all kind of get focused on Supervisor Humphrey's district because of the lake. But in reality, we have a ton of this, like you said, up along Control Road and up there where people go to the Pines in the summer for recreation and park their trailers. And I know a lot of them will take them and move them back off the mountain for the winter, and some of them leave them there. So I think there's a lot to be said about how we're going to sit and look at this. But I don't want to be so restrictive that we're going to put a lot of hurting on a lot of people. That's what I don't want to do, because there's too many folks out there that are working really hard trying to make ends meet, and that's all they can afford. And so we really need to be open-minded about that. And and then see what we can work out.
How do you guys feel about having them as rental for short-term rentals?
Okay, I'm gonna start that one. So, it amazes me somebody would want to spend any money to rent one of those anyway. I mean, for me personally, to go spend a weekend and something like that. But I see other things. They rent the yurts. They rent teepees. They rent, you know, walled tents. I mean, it's just you know, people are kind of just in that mode these days. It's something new. It's whatever. But where you could stack those up on a piece of property and rent them all out, it could cause a lot of issues. It really could. And so, personally, I'm not so sure. I'd really have to think hard about that one to see. You guys?
There's a lot of opportunities with RVs, like glamping, you know what that is. I used to have a 50, I think it was a 56 Silver Streak. And those things are like super desirable. And so people are willing to come up and say, have a weekend in that or whatever. Or maybe somebody doesn't own their own travel trailer. They want to go fishing. So they, you know, for $40 a night, they'll stay in someone else's RV. My main issue is always the impact to the area or the neighborhood. So I think about a guy that owns 200 and some acres. He's a rancher and he's got an RV out in the middle of it. Are we going to go out and mess with that guy? No one's complaining. No one sees it. You know, it's invisible. Yet it's still in violation. So we just got to, I look at it as, is it impacting the neighborhood negatively? So you talk about Pine, Strawberry, Bonita Creek, all this stuff. There's land all over. There's people that come up. They spend the weekend. The mother-in-law's in there for a while, whatever it is. Is there a lot of complaints? Is there anything that's impacting the neighborhood negatively? You say, well, no, however, they're in violation of the ordinance. And so, I guess say, well, is the ordinance then too black and white when it comes to that? Isn't there any kind of a area that someone can use that is not a major impact to the neighbors, and no one really cares? They come up, yeah, okay. They, you know, mother-in-law came up and they stayed in the trailer. Big deal. But there's, you know, they're smoking meth, they're making meth, they're, you know, whatever in the trailer, you know.
They do that in houses too.
Yeah. Or it's really trashed, or, you know, it's really a mess and it impacts the neighborhood. So I feel for you because, and I feel for all of us because there's no real easy solution in this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you know, a lot of this, we've already got ordinances against. You know, blight. Blight is blight, and we have code enforcement for blight. But, and how I feel about, you know, short-term rentals, the same as I would long-term rentals. Pile a bunch on them and rent them out, then you get into health and safety. I mean, I can't build a 4-bedroom house with a septic tank that'll only allow me to build a 2-bedroom house. So if you're gonna have alternative living, such as a motorhome or whatever, and you have a septic, okay, you can only have so many fixtures per septic, per what your septic allows. So why should it be any different for vacation home or portable living rather than a stick-built home? So, you know, I mean, I think a lot of this could be narrowed down with some thought, because no, you can't have 5 RVs on an acre because you don't have the septic to allow it, type thing. And as far as, you know, taxing districts, you know, okay, if you want to put a trailer in an area where you have $500,000 homes, hey, if they want to pay the taxes that those people do, maybe it's okay, because it's going to discourage them from doing that. So and what I would like to hear too is at some of my meetings you said you'd have public hearings. You would get in front of the public. And so what I would like to do is I've heard from my public, because I have public meetings, but I haven't heard from public in Payson, I haven't heard from public in Young. So, I mean, if you're gonna look into this and make recommendations, I'd like to hear what the realtors say in these different areas. I'd like to hear what the public from the other supervisors' districts have to say. But I think at some point that my overall feeling is that we're gonna have to come up with some kind of ordinances to allow some type of alternative living. Because we're in an area where people turn down jobs here because there's no place to live. And until infrastructure gets really further than it is now. But like I say, before we make that decision, I would like to hear from the other districts, public and realtors.
And the plan for staff is after this meeting, I'll be setting that up for the other areas.
Sure.
Wanted to see
Sure.
any thoughts and directions so that as I move forward, we're not going down the wrong path.
Right,
Different than.
And Mr. Chair, and input from the health department, what's their 2 cents worth? Code enforcement, what's their 2 cents worth? Because if we do come up with a balance or happy medium somewhere, that's gonna involve all of those departments. And we're gonna make decisions that they're gonna have to deal with. So I think it would be important to hear from, like I say, code enforcement in our health departments, first responders, how they feel about fighting a fire on a alternative living rather than a stick built. There's no fighting it there. I think there's just a matter of keeping it from spreading because they go up pretty fast. But you know, like I say, there's a whole lot of information that I would like to hear to help maybe narrow things down to what we may need to do in the future. But I appreciate your time, energy, and effort in looking into this, because changing ordinances and changing times is difficult. But we're living in some changing times, and I think that perhaps sometimes we need to change with them.
Okay.
Big topic, Randy. Thank you for diving into it.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for the presentation. Okay, let's push on and get to E, information discussion regarding status updates on facilities and land management department capital projects. Dub's gonna start. He's got a lot of good things he's gonna tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We'll keep this pretty brief, I think. First off, we're going to talk about the Payson Courthouse remodel. That has been in the works for some time now. Plans for the renovations on that, the remodeling, are 95 to 100%, and some of the drawings are at 100%. Some are only about 95 or a little greater. And we went ahead and forwarded those plans to Gordian for a review and scheduling of the joint scope development meeting. That's where we'll do a walkthrough with the general contractor, look at the facility, go over the drawings, and together we develop a joint scope for what's being done there. That's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks, as soon as we get that scheduled. And then after that, we'll be looking to get a cost estimate back in about 2 to 3 weeks. So that's where that one stands. Next up is the Payson Sheriff's Office.
Mr. Chairman, if you have any questions about the projects as we go along, certainly go ahead and ask questions.
Please.
I think you can see my wheels turning right there. huh?
Okay.
All three of you.
So I do have a question,
Yes, sir.
Dub. And so we use Gordian because that's a state contractor, basically, right? That gives us the ability to get out there and get started like we talked about in the past,
Yes.
which
yes.
has been a big help.
They do not actually do the work, but they have general contractors
Underneath
under
them.
them that do the work.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're more like, okay. So I guess what is kind of confusing is if you, so we're going through the state for this program because they've already the state has already vetted all these people. They're good to go. It's not like we have to solicit bids, yada, yada, yada. But I guess what's confusing to me is when we take those people and we walk through a project to put a project together and to build a project, they're a part of that process, right?
Yes.
I guess that's kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm simple-minded and don't get it, but it's kind of like they're helping you develop a project here that they're going to be a part of building.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean by perhaps, though? Because,
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it can still be put out to bid. It's to put together the scope and the bid package.
okay, so Gordian is more or less just like a consultant, I guess, that helps us with these designs, Joseph? Or
Yes, Chairman, Board. So if there's a way I can explain it to really simplify it, it's a conduit to some of these state contractors. With it being a conduit to reach out to whatever contractor we select that's pre-approved by the state, pre-vetted. What Gordian helps support is also the cost and the timeline and accountability. So, and also the scope of work. So say we wanted to go for a project, we would reach out to Gordian. Gordian would then work with us at selecting a pre-vetted state contractor. They would sit in on that meeting. The biggest thing that's going to come out of that meeting is they're going to be able to use Gordian software and to set up their scope and the cost. And the biggest takeaway is the cost. That cost is pre-selected. So even if we, if it's something as simple as a door handle, it doesn't necessarily say exactly what door handle it is. It's just a flat cost. So it allows us to ensure that we're not going to exceed that cost, and also allow us to hold to the scope that we establish. I hope that was helpful. I'd be happy to take any other questions with that.
go ahead, James.
I know that it's important that we consider local contractors in all that we do. And so it's my understanding that we are not, this process of going through Gordian is not precluding us from considering local contractors. Should there be an interest from a local contractor to be a participant in one of our projects. Is that correct?
Roger that, Mr. Minlove. And to your point, our PVVR contractor that was selected by us with Gordian, they went out of their way to work with us to try and select local contractors.
They did.
To get pulled into it.
Right.
And it was really, really neat to see. But we intend to doing that pretty much every project, is to have the emphasis, and that's why we have the partnership with Gordian. It gives us a little bit of leverage with some of these state contractors. We've reached out to other state contractors before, and we're kind of at their mercy, even though it's with the state contractor. With the Gordian, it gives us a little bit of leverage because they want to hold that partnership not only with us, but with Gordian.
Okay, I think I'm getting it, so, yeah,
Roger
I'll
that.
listen some more. You guys have any questions on any of that? Tim?
No, that's fine, I'm good.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Can I make one comment about this? Me personally, and I still have this thing with disabilities and being able to accommodate those that have needs. And so what I'd ask is a plan to just include for the courthouse in Payson, just the stairs, the same as we have now that are proposed, but also to have a consideration for you to decide of a possibility of including an elevator, a vestibule out there in the entryway, build a vestibule so that there's an option for an elevator. Now, I don't know what the costs are going to be, and so that's kind of where they're looking at two sets of plans, one with an elevator, one without.
sure.
And to be able to bring that information to the board, and be able to make a more informed decision. Yeah, we would love to do the disability, but we are compliant with what we're going to do with the fire safety that we have to include and all that stuff, and we're going to go with that for now. But that's an option that's coming with this particular building.
Good. Thank you, Dub.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Minliff. Good points there. There are two sets of drawings being submitted, one with an elevator and one without. So that'll be a part of the walkthrough and the scope. All right. Moving on to the Payson Sheriff's Office remodel.
You know what, hang on just
Yes,
a
sir.
minute, let's back up just a
Yeah.
little bit. I think there's an important factor about this courthouse that needs to be brought up. If the elevator is in fact put in there to where handicapped people have more accessibility to the building, the building itself will be more designed to accommodate more people, or,
Mr. Chairman, at this time, no.
okay,
We're not planning any remodel for the upstairs. We promised Judge Wright very early that we would do something to make his courtroom a little bit more functional. And that functionality in the Superior Courtroom in that building brings with it the fire safety stuff and fire marshal and all those things that we've been able to push off to this point. We are not able to any longer.
okay, so there's more to it than just getting the accessibility part of it done.
There are some narrow doors, narrow hallways. Can you accommodate those? Can you get somebody to do them? Probably so, but they're not going to be the complete ADA compliant that requires a 3-foot corridor, 3-foot doorway, and those types of things that would require it to be completely accessible. It will not be. We're not planning any remodel of the upstairs.
So let me get something straight in my head then. By putting the elevator on there, and I'm gonna use you for a good example, you know, when you broke your hip. So you're on crutches and you're hobbling around, that'll be a benefit for workers to be able to still get to their desks or whatever. Having that,
Mr. Chairman, there's no way I'm doing stairs.
no,
Even now, 2 months after I broke my hip, I'm not doing stairs.
right,
And I would not be able to access the second floor. And so, but I would be able to, using crutches at this point, would be able to access an office and those type, do my work.
right,
As an elevator. So that's the difference, yes.
okay,
Mr. Chair,
yeah.
if I could just clarify a question. The purpose of a remodel for our new building, what is it for? More handicap accessible? Is that the purpose for our remodel?
Mr. Chairman, oh, go ahead.
Oh, please.
Mr. Chairman, Judge Wright came to us and asked the Board of Supervisors to make his courtroom more accommodating to just the proceedings that he does. And the Board of Supervisors included that as a priority as far as the ARPA money and being able to spend it for ARPA money. So that's what this is about, is the main focus is to make the Superior Courtroom in Payson at that courthouse building more able to meet the needs of the Superior Court in the northern part of the county. And that is just downstairs. County attorney takes up most of the space upstairs.
So Jessica, you're the one that wants the elevator, right?
It's all,
Chairman, members, supervisors, so there's also the constable's office and CASA is up there as well. So it would be the department head's decision if, you know, they had an opinion as far as wanting an elevator or not. The consensus so far from the county attorney's office is that it's not necessary. There are specific employees who would possibly utilize it, but that's the stance of the county attorney's office at least.
Okay, thank you. You good, Tim?
I'm good.
Okay, Dub.
So we'll talk about the Payson Sheriff's Office remodel. We went through pretty much exactly what we're talking about doing with the courthouse with the joint scope development. We've already done that with the Sheriff's Office. We had a joint scope meeting and then a walkthrough with Skyline Builders. They are one of the general contractors that is beneath Gordian. And from that, we received a cost estimate of $2.2 million. And currently, we are doing a cost comparison analysis on that. We don't have all the options in just yet. And once we do, we'd like to come back to the board and solidify those options on that.
Okay.
Questions?
Does anybody want to start besides me?
I'm good, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, thanks. So thanks for that. And I know we're gonna be looking at options of purchasing another property that's twice the size and newer for approximately the same price. And so, that's something that I've been aware of for many, many months now, and, feel positive toward that direction, as this structure here is older, decaying more, smaller, et cetera. And so I know we're gonna talk about that. So this has exceeded the proposed budget by a huge amount, because I think in the beginning, we were talking about a remodel that might be in the 750,000 range, and we're, you know, at three times that, really. So it just makes sense that we look at options and have vision for the sheriff's department and some of our other departments as we go forward. So that's just an observation, not a question.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
can I make a comment about that? George Christensen. The 2.2 million is, other than the jail cells themselves, is a complete gut of the entire building. So with that, it would be brand new, essentially, other than the shell. It's going to be a brand new building at the cost of 2.2 million. Now, that does not change the cells, but it does add a kitchen, does add laundry, and does add functionality for the jail itself. So that, just to let you know the entire extent of why that's such a huge price tag, is a complete gut other than the actual cells themselves.
So Joseph, with that in mind, when you tie into a building of this age, what are you gonna find when you open it up? I mean, are you satisfied you can hold it at 2.2 if it went that way?
Chairman,
Or is it gonna end up being leveled and started over again?
Chairman, Board of Supervisors, that's a really great question. A facility of this size and aged infrastructure, there is a high probability of coming across issues. Now, that's not uncommon with any kind of renovation this size, but we are, if this is a pathway we move forward with, we are anticipating quite a few challenges that come with that. And there's going to be obviously costs associated with that also.
That's my biggest question. And another question I have too is if let's say we go a different route and we do end up acquiring another piece of property and moving things around, we'll continue to use these jail cells. Is that correct? Is that kind of the plan?
That is correct. From a facility standpoint, they will be operational. Obviously, it'd be up to the SO whether they wanted to continue their operation, but from a facility standpoint, yes. If that was one of the pathways, to kind of get a little bit deeper into your question, we would be looking at doing a little bit more extensive maintenance that has kind of been laid to the side until we have established a pathway forward.
So we would still end up having to put some work into these cells at some point to keep using this building.
Roger that, and it's important to, just like Mr. Minlove was mentioning, the cells are a completely separate portion of the way we view this facility.
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't necessarily put in a lot of investment or maintenance into the cells outside of something very basic. But as far as the rest of the facility or operational side, we would be doing it over a period of time, whether that's a 1-year or 5-year maintenance plan. So it'd be similar to falling underneath a lot of our other maintenance plans.
And so, James, maybe you can answer this. If we went that different direction and we acquired another building for the sheriff's office and whoever else we need to work with, then well, maybe you too, Joseph, would we still be looking at putting like the kitchen set up or laundry facilities in this building?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that we would need to do something to an extent. Yes.
So
do something.
So if we purchased another building, thinking that was going to kind of get us a lot further down the road, we're still going to end up putting a chunk of money into this to do that.
Roger that, that's correct. So, something to point out is most of it will fall underneath the operational space of maintenance. So, capital funding, I think, would be limited to what Mr. Minlove kind of outlined. If we wanted to hit the kitchen and do a significant renovation there, then we would be looking at some other source of funding. But as far as some of the maintenance, I don't think the impact from the maintenance would be significant because we're going to be looking at prioritizing it and spreading it over a period of time.
Do you guys have something you want to chime in here, or you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
So our option of either putting 2.2 plus into this building or going out and purchasing another setup, another building, the price on that was 3 million? About 2? And so that, if I remember right, was quite a large building too. And so not only would it be able to meet what the sheriff's office needs were, but we would actually have some additional space for someone else.
Mr. Chairman, that could be considered, yes.
Okay, so Joseph, if we went and bought another building for $2 million and did whatever we need to, which I'm sure would take a few more dollars than that to do it, just off the top of your head, I'm not pinning you down on anything, so, but just a wild guess, what do you think dollars-wise it's gonna take to do what you see in this? Just, I mean, it's hard for you to tell because you haven't opened up walls. I get it, but, you know, $500,000, $250,000?
Chairman, board, it's just like you mentioned, it is very rough to be able to say even a rough order of magnitude cost. So I'm very reluctant to give any cost with that without some type of assessment. But what I can tell you is from a maintenance standpoint, I don't think it would be significant. However, when you start talking about doing any kind of renovation, whether it's a kitchen or some of the other operational space for the jail, there's going to be costs associated with that. But I can confidently say I don't think those renovations would be significant because we're not touching infrastructure or some of the other things that where you just naturally will run into challenges and higher costs.
I guess the reason I asked that question is, okay, we buy another building and it's take a few dollars more to get it where you want it to be to satisfy everyone. And then we turn around and we go in here to fix a kitchen, or we get to go in here to fix this or that or another thing. Pretty soon we've got a chunk of change into both those buildings. That's kind of the balance where I'm trying to look at, I guess.
And, Chairman and Board, that's a very good point, and that's something that we're considering part of our analysis. If we choose a different pathway, naturally this will come underneath maintenance, but something to keep in mind is it's going to have a maintenance footprint regardless. Now, for sure, if we did an upgrade specifically to this facility, the idea would give us a little bit of buy time for some of that maintenance. But I don't think it's so much that we're getting rid of the maintenance footprint. I think simply we're just looking at the size of it.
Go ahead, Steve.
So the way I interpret the current sheriff's office is that it's overcrowded with the sheriff's department. It's completely at capacity or more. It's full, and yes, it needs paint, it needs flooring, it needs that, but it's all offices. There's just an awful lot of offices already. So I think what you're saying, from a maintenance point of view, that may take something over time, is we need to come in, retouch the surfaces, fix doors, paint, refloor, do something. But we're not gutting things out. We're not changing structural issues. We're just saying, here's a whole bunch more offices we could use for something. Let's clean them up. And the sheriff's department that is continuing to grow and likely will over the next several decades will need more than that space anyway, is the way I see it. We can fix it today for 2.2 million and outgrow it 10 years from now easily. Mm-hmm. And then what do we have? a really expensive remodel and then another purchase. So that's kind of my rationale.
Roger that.
Okay, Mike, I guess I'll chime in. I guess from Payson, are they housing most of their prisoners here? And that's just kind of an overnight deal until they transport them here?
Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, I can't go into specifics with their operation, but what I vaguely understand from that operation is, yes, they hotel at that location for a short period of time and then transport, if need be, down into the Globe operation.
Okay. And the reason being is because that jail is in pretty rough shape.
Yes, sir.
And security and all the stuff, and there's no kitchen and all that kind of thing. And so we're spending a lot of money for more sheriff's offices, and we're still gonna transport prisoners down here, or offenders, I guess is what we're looking at. Okay, I guess, and if things are gonna grow and expand in the future, I guess we're gonna have to expand this jail down here if we're gonna be transporting more people down here from all the people working up there in all the offices.
Jessica?
Okay,
Chairman, member supervisors, I can't pull up my roster right now, but I do know that they utilize the facilities in Payson. They also transport inmates back from Globe to Payson for court appearances there.
okay. I'm just thinking if we're gonna throw a bunch of money away on new buildings and remodeling offices and things of that nature, some of our attention should go towards housing and what we're doing with and for the offenders whom, which couldn't cost that much in lawsuits real easy. And so that just my 2 cents. I mean, I've been up in that facility, and yes, it all needs work. I agree 100%. But I'm just wondering if we're going to throw a lot of money at this, why aren't we doing some of it to make it a better facility for the people that for the offenders, I guess, as well as staff?
Go ahead, Steve.
The discussion all along has been that it's to touch the jail system would be several $1 million to upgrade just the jail system, so it was never part of the remodel to begin with. So I kind of envision the upgrade of the jail system as something down the future, maybe a future board with future money in a new location, yes. But right now it's considered really unaffordable to touch those jails at the moment, that facility, even though they are outdated. And the reason it's more or less a hotel pass-through, and as what Jessica said, kind of a destination back and forth, is we just don't have enough detention officers to really keep everybody there. So they process them through and move them down.
Roger that.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I'm just saying.
James?
Mr. Chairman, there's a problem that's not going to be fixed, and it's probably, there's only one solution considering the finances in Gila County, and that is to establish and organize a jail district. The earliest that we would even consider organizing a jail district, that has to be approved by the voters. Well, I take that back. The Board of Supervisors can organize a jail district. The voters would have to approve the tax, whatever that might be, for the jail district. The earliest that would go to the voters is 2025, 2026 election. And so we are looking at the absolute earliest that we can do anything for our jails, because these jail cells up in Payson are not, there's not really any difference than what we have here in Globe. They are all in very poor condition. And there is just not anything that we can do as far as anything meaningful. We just put over $1 million to replace the roof here in Globe, and what did that get us? Another 10 years, I guess, in a new roof for $1 million. But that is the only solution that there is long-term, is organizing and having the voters approve a jail district in Gila County. What are those costs that we're looking at for a jail in Globe and in Payson to establish that? Minimum of $25 to $30 million. If you look at what construction costs, $250,000 for $250 per square foot, $250 for a residential home stick-built that you were talking about, Supervisor Humphrey, $250 for stick-built, a commercial business, $500 a square foot. You can do 2 to 4 times that for a jail. So $1,000 to $2,000 a square foot for a jail is what it costs. Just astronomical because of the safety considerations, the hardening of the building and all that. Just a door like this that we might spend $250 for is $1,000 in a jail because of all the considerations that have to be. So I'm long-winded today, but $30 million to do anything meaningful for the jail system in Gila County.
It is very costly. You know, the bad thing of all that, though, and our constituents need to understand too, is one lawsuit can eat up that much money. I mean, that's the balance, and that's a hard balance hard one to choose, you know, to pick from, but that's reality.
That's reality. That's absolutely true. And we get lawsuits regularly related to jail.
Continue on, Dub.
Good discussion. So we'll move on to the Pleasant Valley Veterans Retreat. That is, the project is complete and turned out beautifully, I think, and I think we've got some good feedback on that. The contractor did an amazing job with a very compressed schedule on that. They really moved through it quickly. That was phase 1 that is complete. We're looking at additional work, but phase 1 is complete. They have been this last week doing punch list items just to finish out some details, and they are scheduled for final inspection this week. So that's phase 1. And facilities would like to offer a big thank you to everyone involved in this project, both on the county side and on the contractor side. I think there was a lot of great input, a lot of help along the way, and turned out very well.
Well, I think the thing is you guys need a big thank you for pushing on it that hard, and all your people. They did an awesome job on it, and yeah, it come out looking nice. So
Good.
Really nice.
Good. Any questions or discussion on that one?
You know, it did really come out good. I'm just going to praise everybody involved. The soft opening we had, it's amazing. And I know whenever you have sort of a deadline, there's a crunch time, and everyone is pulled together for that crunch, and it's never easy. And but you guys are doing great. It's occasionally I have people talk to me about this facility, and sometimes I have to defend it. Sometimes I don't, and I easily defend it as going to be one of our nation's greatest veterans retreat. Does it serve a local person in Tono Village that wants to go for a cup of coffee? No, it's not intended to be that. What it's intended to be, it will serve very, very much so, and I'm really excited to be behind it and supportive of it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Michelson Building. Let's see, we have, a little bit further, yes, please. These are just pictures of the, that's right, there we go, Michelson. Thank you. Let's see, Sun Valley Builders was a general contractor with a state contract that we were able to tie into for this, and they've made good progress on the demo, and the removal of the old roof. The picture, I think everybody's pretty much seen there. The roof is all gone, and they're finishing up the demo and the cleanup afterwards. The trusses have been delivered on site. They haven't started hanging those yet. The traffic disruption has been real minimal. We haven't had any complaints. I don't know if anyone else has heard, but we haven't had any complaints as far as traffic or restrictions down there. They are going to be blocking the whole street off one day at a time, just when they're swinging trusses. So that'll be upcoming. But they've worked with the City of Globe on that, and we haven't had any complaints. No adjoining business complaints, so it's been good. Let's see. Oh, and the project continues to be on schedule. Expected completion on that one is August 28th.
Oh, that's coming up pretty quick.
Yeah. Any questions, comments?
My only comment, I think that's an awesome project and a really good use for the building. I'm glad to see us being able to do this and our partners helping us with it and everything. That's a huge plus. You guys?
Yeah, I'm glad to see it going. I'm glad it has that completion date because we are in the middle of monsoon. And I know the roof was an expensive project, and I do know that we have infrastructure inside, and the more range that infrastructure inside has to go through, the more difficulty it'll become for the remodel. So I'm glad to hear that they're gonna get right on hanging those trusses and getting a roof on it. Because I'm not sure about some of those old wood floors and stuff inside if they don't get it dried in before too long. But it's a good project. I think it'll help a lot of young businesses and things get started. So yeah, I'm supportive of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Say, Doug, do you know if you're doing an asphalt shingle or tar or
It's a
metal?
built-up roofing. It's a synthetic material, built-up roofing, foam below, and then a synthetic outer layer.
Okay, so kind of a flat roof, right?
Well, it
What
is
you'd call a
pitched.
flat roof.
I wouldn't call it that. It is a pitched roof,
Okay.
and then it has the water all drains. There will be essentially crickets along the way to the back of the building. It's all drained off the back of the building
Oh, okay.
into some downspouts. And,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll move to the Fairgrounds Restaurant. All right. So as everyone knows, that's a prefab building that's going in on an earthen pad. The building itself, manufacturer has a prefabricated concrete pad or slab they'll sit on top of that. So that earthen pad has been completed that the building will sit on. The septic system design and documentation is being finalized by an engineer that is under the general contractor. That has not quite been submitted yet, but when it goes in, we're expecting about 3 weeks for approval on the septic system permit. APS has produced an initial design for extension of primary line and a new transformer from the east side of the arena and corrals there. They're extending over to the west side and installing a new transformer there to be the power supply for this building. That, let's see, estimated completion of APS work is on October 30th. The building is presently scheduled to be delivered and set the week of October 23rd, and expected completion of the project is November 21st.
What's the dates on our fair?
Third week of September.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah, it's,
Ain't gonna make it this year.
Nope.
it isn't, unfortunately. All right, Cassie, we'll move on to Scale House.
I got a
Yes, sir,
question.
I'm
You
sorry.
said they're gonna extend power from where to where?
Yeah, they're gonna bring a primary side off of that existing transformer on the east side, and they'll be.
On the east side, over by where the old concrete paddocks are?
No, that's by where the two new arenas are down south there, and on the east side of the one arena, there is a transformer there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're going to tie into that same primary and bring it around to this side and set another transformer that'll be on the west side. And the advantage to that is that there will be further power available off of that transformer for future needs, whatever gets put in out there in the future. But for now, it's just going to be feeding a 200 amp service on this new building.
Okay, so are we still in a conflict with APS with the other electrical and usage of it and that kind of stuff?
Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, we still have challenges, but over the past couple of weeks, I'd like to say any challenges we did have been resolved, and we have solutions moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
James?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, that we had intended, electrical's the biggest problem that we have out there, and being able to do any work, real meaningful work, without having a plan of what our electrical is. And so we've been having a analysis performed of the electrical for the facility. And maybe since we're talking about that and the electrical for this, can we get an update of where we're at in electrical, when it's estimated that we will have a report to tell us what the status of the electrical is and what we can expect, so we can bring some to the board of, we need to invest in the electrical at the fairgrounds. Just, can we get a little bit information about that?
Chairman, thank you, Mr. Midlove. So as far as the electrical assessment, the first step in that is to evaluate and assess what we currently have. And we're on the tail end of that. We did our internal assessment once we got it back and working with some of the architects and engineers. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to show the admin team, and then at that point, hopefully have something that we can bring forward as far as something that's actionable. And what we're looking at essentially is trying to identify what critical infrastructure, particularly the electrical, that is at an age or a condition that requires us to either replace or repair it. The next phase that we'll be looking at is going to be a long-term plan, and that long-term plan will then help us decide what we're looking at for infrastructure expansion. So without diving too far in the weeds, I hope that was helpful.
Mr. Chairman, it's, I want to hit on the scale house also, if we're done with that one. The new scale house has been set in position. You can see on the slide there, it's been set on the footings at that location. That project was also waiting for a Arizona Department of Environmental Quality permit, and that was just issued, I think, in the last week. So the building permit is in place with the septic permit. And with that permit being issued, they're currently doing the inside build-out of the scale house with drywall going in this week.
Good deal.
Yeah. So I think that's all I have on that one. Questions?
You don't have any other projects? We need to get busy here. What, Joseph?
Not actively.
Supervisor Humphrey, you got any questions or comments?
When will this scale house go into use?
You know, we've got a tentative date of August 15th on it. We're hoping that may go a little quicker. You want to add anything, Joseph?
Yes, Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, that's when facilities will have our portion of it complete. It'll be up to Public Works and Homero's team as far as it becoming operational or when they intend to start utilizing it.
Okay, yeah, that's middle of August.
All right, that's everything I have. Anything else?
Good job, Dub.
Well, I don't know, but thank you. I
Good
appreciate it.
projects too, you
Good
guys.
projects.
Really good projects.
Thank you.
Are you good, Supervisor Christensen?
Hey, thank you.
Okay, well with that, we'll continue on. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
All right, call the public. Do we have anybody in Payson?
No, sir.
And how we doing on YouTube, Cassie? 20? Good. And we don't have anyone here for call the public. So we'll start with updates, number 5. James, you want to start?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to report, if I could take a minute, about the assessor's office. I have met with the staff from the assessor's office here in Globe and in Payson, and we have organized things, set things up. There is a position that we're interviewing for to get a position filled, and so I feel like things are progressing with the assessor's office. Wanted to read a comment that we received from the public about the assessor's office. It says, I wanted to personally reach out to you regarding 2 members of your staff, Corey Cunningham and Dylan Mojica. They deserve praises and commendations as they were extremely courteous, professional, and efficient. My first contact was with Corey, and she was nice to work with on a recent parcel purchase and having it recorded. Knowing she was balancing another responsibility within your office, I was very impressed with her patience and knowledge to assist me. She was able to expedite my case in the most efficient way. Corey then referred me to Dylan as we want to combine 2 parcels that we now own. Corey worked quickly to review our parcel combination form and quickly start the combination process. This was Dylan that did that. He explained the necessary process and all the variables involved going forward. Again, his courteous and professional manner was outstanding. Please be sure to commend both Corey and Dylan, as it was a true pleasure to work with them. They make a great part of your team. Comment for the assessor's office too, particularly in the assessor's office. Mr. Chairman, I want to point out, and I know you might mention this, Supervisor Christensen, but the Gila County Provisional Community College District, with their issues that they've had going forward and wanting to do a new contract, or having told Eastern Arizona College that they would they would get out of the contract in a year, that the Gila County Provisional Community College District is having a town hall meeting here in Globe tonight, July 25th, at the Gila Pueblo campus at 5:30 p.m. and in Payson on Thursday, July 27th at Payson High School at 5:30 p.m. So they'll be discussing where they're at as a college, and we're getting input from the public as where we go and where we stand with Gila County Provisional Community College District. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Minlove, I heard that they had a 5:30 tonight at the Miami Auditorium.
It must be Miami Auditorium now then. Thanks.
No, I don't know, but now that we need to confirm, because I heard it was at the Miami High School Auditorium at 5:30.
I would go with that.
And so I would like to confirm. I would like to confirm because that's where I was going this evening. So I don't know.
I'm going, so I want to go to where you're going.
Well, then we need to confirm on where that's at. But yeah, I think that would.
I think Jessica's checking in on it.
That would make sense. They're having it at Payson High School in the north, and so Miami.
Thank you very much.
So Miami High School is the official word, unless we find out otherwise.
All right.
You got a newspaper, huh?
Supervisor Humphrey, you got an update for us?
Other than that, no, just public meetings and that's it. I don't have a lot to report. Just things as normal. Thank you.
Supervisor Christensen.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And yeah, the only comments I'm going to have is on the community college. So there is a lot of there's a lot going on there. Okay. And so my concern is whether or not we can actually start regular school as normal August 21st. So I realize that there's a lot of negotiations over contracts, timing, and he said, she said, this kind of stuff. So I look forward to the one tonight. I won't be at, but I will be at the one in Payson on Thursday night. So I have been in contact with EAC. I have been in contact with GCC. I have been in contact with Mr. Menlove and also Jessica. And from what I understand, there is some things going on right now at the state legislature that we will be updated on later as far as how that goes. So very complicated and very touchy situation, my concern is for the students, the employees, and that we actually have a school. That's the whole purpose of having all this, is to have a school. And so that's my concern. And I do have the information here. So auditorium 30, no, I can't see it immediately, but anyway, the paper today has a considerable amount of space used for this topic. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Topic. Did you have something, James?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have a discussion with the Board of Supervisors, perhaps an executive session regarding legal, how we do, what responsibility the Gila County Board of Supervisors is, and legal advice from Jessica. Looking to hold that meeting next Tuesday, and in an executive session, perhaps.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
On the college? On,
Yes.
okay.
As governments, we get kind of tied together, so.
All right. And so, last meeting, the day after that, I left for DC. Rolled into DC, and then following morning, I was in front of the subcommittee on federal lands, and it was a really good deal. There was 3 bills that they were hearing that day, and they all had to do with veterans. All 4 bills. They had set up a special day honoring veterans and everything for this hearing. And so there was actually 4 bills we sat in there on, and went through all of it. One thing that I was really impressed with committee members that were there, at one time there was probably 5 committee members sitting in there, and at one time there was 1. I mean, they're in and out and doing other things, but overall the most I seen sitting on that board was 5. But anyway, they were really concerned about keeping things open, access on federal lands, being able to use federal lands, you know, and parks and everything else for everybody. There was obviously some pushes on the veteran side of it for some better employment opportunities on the parks especially, it seemed like, but also with Forest Service and BLM. And so they were really pushing on that. They were really good, had really good questions for me on the vet center. They were glad to hear it was being used. There wasn't anything negative come across from them. Everything that they questioned, everything that they said, you could tell that they were the group that wanted to utilize our public lands. They weren't the ones that wanted to sit there and just lock everything down and shut it down. So I was really happy to see that. Prior to going into that hearing that morning, I had an opportunity to sit down with Congressman Crane for about 20 minutes in his office, him and his staffer, and we talked about different things. One of them I brought up was the 203 road, and gave them kind of a rundown where we were there and my thoughts on it. And so they're actually going to reach out and do some digging in on the 203 road. And so that was one of them. I talked to them about hiring practices when the Forest Service especially. It's like when we have like YCC kids and we're dealing with different functions, and then they don't have people to be there to work kids and things like that. So it's a big interest in us. They have the direct rehire, but they don't seem to utilize it. They can't get it done. And so I talked to him about that. Of course, he had a lot of questions about the vet site and how it was coming, what it looked like. I went through all that with him, invited him back to come back anytime, hunt us up, we'll be there, show you through it. And so it was a really good deal. I guess it wasn't really nerve-wracking testifying in front of those folks. I mean, because they weren't the bunch to just grill you on some off-the-wall questions. I mean, in about 5 minutes of them talking to other people around there, you could tell they were serious and they wanted to make sure things were utilized and used, which was right up my alley. So it was good. It was a really good experience for me. I really enjoyed it, and all that. I stepped on a plane right after that and ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, and took another plane to Austin. Kathy rolled into Austin before I got there. We attended the NACO conference. Had a good conference on that. Of course, It was Friday, I was in the Public Lands Committee. There was a lot going on that. And then the next day I attended the WIR committee. Kathy hit the Veterans and Military Committee in there. Had some really good speakers on that, Veterans Affairs. One thing that came out of the WIR is the LATCF funds. There was a lot of money put out to these counties, and then what they're wanting to do was get 1% from every county back to establish this national center that would help with information, help us get information on our counties to give to Congress up there for PILT money, things of this nature, really help us build a case about what western counties are about. They were hoping to collect $15 million. Today they're at just a little over $4 million. They've got a ways to go. There's some counties out there that have paid the first part of it, haven't paid the second part. There's counties out there that haven't paid any, may not pay any, but they're going to go ahead and proceed with this national center. They're going to go ahead and be advertising for a director for it and start putting it together. So they seem pretty confident that they'll get enough of that 1% to get this established and get it working. And quite honestly, when they do it and it works like they're wanting it to, it'll help us in the long run, especially with more PILT money in the future and SRS money. It's the two programs that really mean a lot to our counties. And so I'm hoping that gets through. The PILT fly-in will be in September. I really don't want to go back to DC, so if either one of you would like to go to fly in on the PILT, I know Tim really enjoys it. So Supervisor Christensen, you interested in it?
I certainly could be. Do you have to have a COVID shot
Nope.
these days?
Nope. Everything's opened up.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
September?
It's in September. I had the dates wrote down, the exact dates, and I could not find them, but we can get those for you.
Okay.
It's like a 3-day deal.
All right. Yeah, let me know.
And so, in the past, PILT, when you go back to those fly-ins, that's the only thing that everybody kind of criticized last year was we don't need to go talk to the congressmen and the senators that are in our corner. We need to go talk to the ones that really don't like to see us walking through the door. And so I'm hoping that's the way it turns this year, to where you can really sit down with the folks that disagree and see if you can change some minds. I hope that's the way it turns out. I guess other than that, that's all I got right now. You guys prompt you for anything?
No, I'm good, thank you.
You good? Steve, you're good? So with that, we've had a very long meeting. It's almost 1:30, and if there's nothing else, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks everybody for hanging in there.